Okay. Before Comey starts, I forgot to do something yesterday. When I introduced myself, I talked about my military and police career. I've been on SCAG since 1994, so 27 years ago. I've been the chairman of Metrolink for 2 years. Between the two major accidents, I was lucky there because I was vice president. Right after the accident in Burbank, San Bernardino pulled their member. So I just automatically took over and had to handle all the press for the accident. And I was out of president when the next big accident happened. So anyway, I was president, chairman of OCTA when we passed Measure M2. We got the environmentalists to sign on 100% by guaranteeing a certain amount of money that came off the M2 bond issue for environmental issues. We bought a lot of land and land banked it for them. So that's my career. I've been on the city council 30 years now. I'm in my 31st year, and this is my 8th time as mayor in the 30 years. So just want to get that out of the way. I forgot it yesterday. Now I'll turn it over to Comey, who's going to kind of give us a recap of yesterday before we start today's.
All right. I don't know that I remember all of yesterday anymore.
Oh, no, word for word.
There's some things I remember about yesterday, but it didn't happen in here. Oh, yeah? Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. It's good to be back here and to see you all, and everybody's healthy and excited, it looks like, to be here, and that's a good thing. I want to take a moment of personal privilege to, first of all, thank the team back there, Perla and Maggie, and Edward for setting us up, and of course we want to thank our hotel staff for taking care of us. We started yesterday doing introductions, and one of the things I heard a few things, and one of the things I heard is we want to get to know each other so we can obviously work well together if you get to know each other. And I hope yesterday was a good start to that, where we got to know each other. We had good provisions for dinner, and there was follow-up after party after that enabled that interaction and getting to know each other. And several folks talked about wanting to be more involved, and I'm hoping that what you learned, some of the things you learned yesterday and some of the folks you interacted with allows you to begin to know how to get more involved. I also heard about promoting the region, and that's really one of the benefits of getting together and having this time together away from the rush of action items and motions and roll call votes on a monthly basis, to actually talk a little bit more in depth about topics and have opportunity to question that allows us to form a better knowledge base that allows us to promote this region. I talked about the privilege of the work we do. I assert this everywhere I go. The privilege is that we are charged with stewardship over a region that is the most economic, vibrant region in the country, and probably one of the top 3 metro regions in the world. And that, again, you could Google it. You could Google it. When we talk about being the 15th largest economy in the world, with a GDP of about just north of $1 trillion, it's not what we do at SCAG, but we have a responsibility at SCAG to make sure we do no harm, and if nothing, but mostly to enhance that and continue to support all of the elements that add up to that vibrant economy. And then I think the last thing I heard, or one of the last things I heard, was to look to solve the issues before us. And hopefully the discussions we're having is with an eye to not only to get more involved, to promote the region, but also to begin to solve some of the issues before us. We had Darren talked through the SCAG 101. That was really with the intention to show not just to show our org chart and show our budget, but I think the context of that is to sort of go over how we have changed over time, and of necessity, that also affects where we focus our work. Having said that, we come back to what the main line of our work is, and I think Sarah did a good job covering that with Annie on Connect SoCal. What you'll find, what we'll talk about the next few months is Connect SoCal, so it was a good discussion it was a good thing to do a primer here and let you know where we are, where it's going, with the understanding that there will still be some difficult conversations to be had, and hopefully you are beginning to get equipped for being able to, one, ask the right questions, but also just have a very good working knowledge of what's to come. We will be, addressing issues of the future. We want to also make sure we put it in context. It's a planning exercise that is sort of, it's provided for by state and federal statute. And it's a planning exercise that has sticks and carrots to it. We feel an obligation to do the best we can. We think our 2020 plan was the best of the plans we've done. My expectation, and one that is unyielding, is that the 2024 plan will be even better. But that only happens with everyone's participation. So we're looking forward to being able to deliver on that. We talked about the EAC work plan for a bit. That has become a tradition that I value, and I think our team at SCAG values, because it allows us to have some guardrails to the work that we do on a tactical level for the year, and also connect us to the interest and priorities of the president. And so we spent some time talking to President Brown earlier on, and got to know some of the things that he values, and we're able to plug that into the EAC work plan. And so that work plan will be revised based on the comments we got from you yesterday and brought back to the EAC in the fall, and hopefully we'll report out from it as we work from it. But it also guides the work of the various policy committees in the outlook that Sarah presented. And then we talked about district evaluations, and I think what I remember is we're going to go to 140 RC members.
That's what I remember.
Is that what you remember?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that to see who's still listening. District evaluations is one, I never remember which years, some odd years it happens, 3, 5, and 8.
3 and 8.
3 and 8. Oh. 3 and 8. So this is the 3-year, and then the next one is 2028. And so we do this every 5 years, and it's that time, and it always is, whether you like it or not. There are segments of our region that this is what they've been waiting for 5 years, and so we expect to have a subcommittee established. And what I heard yesterday was the likelihood that we will not be adding additional members, but we need to go through a process where we air out the issues and the contentions that we might have on district evaluation across the region. So today, having said all of that, today we are going to continue our conversation on the regional policy manual, or the regional council policy manual. Mike did a primer yesterday, and we'll take it from there. I think we have a setup for that. But I also want to talk about what's to come. I think the next thing to come today is to talk about our strategic plan update, and we'll have the benefit of having Bill Higgins here. He sees COGS across the country, especially across California. And so hopefully he can do some level setting before we get into the conversation on the strategic plan. So I'll stop there and see if there are any additional comments. What did I miss in the wrap up? What's the highlight that you had that maybe you want to bring up that's worthy of note. And otherwise, we'll turn it over to Mike. So we'll take a moment and look around and see who's got any additions, comments, or corrections. All right. Mike, it's yours. Bless you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you again after a wonderful evening. It was nice to socialize with everyone, to Kome's point, and get to know you all a little bit better. We're going to jump back into the policy manual amendment update. I do want to take just a moment, Mr. Chairman, if it's your pleasure, to just confirm that we don't have any public comments in the room on this item before we proceed.
Madam Secretary, any public comments on this item? No public comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. As you'll recall, we have a handful of proposals for your consideration, and what I thought maybe we could do today to make this an efficient use of our time is, as we move through each one of them, we can take a pause at the end of each topic for input from this body, which we will then kind of take some notes on and take into account, such that when we get through today, the goal would be to have your perspective on these proposals, and then we would package them into one set of items to come back at a later date in the near future for your ultimate recommendation to go to the regional council at an upcoming meeting. So the purpose of this is a bit of a working discussion. And with that in mind, you'll recall we have 4 items for us to discuss today. My colleague Richard Lamb is going to be helping out with this presentation on the first couple of them. And so for that, I will turn it over to Richard. You might recall he introduced himself yesterday. He's been with us since November, has been a great addition to the team, and I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing from him on a couple of these items.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so let's just get right into it. I have 2 items I'm pleased to present to you today. The first one has to do with the voting provisions. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, please, thanks. Yeah, the voting provisions in the Regional Council Policy Manual. What we have right now is in a no confidence vote, when a council member is going to be voted off the Regional Council, the policy manual states—
Richard, you have to talk into the mic, otherwise it's hard to hear from back there.
Thank you, Kome.
There you go.
So when there's a no confidence vote, what happens is the regional policy manual says that all members of a city council get to cast a vote. Now that's allows for certain cities that might have more than 5 council members to vote and kind of be an unequal amount of votes versus other cities. Now we compare that to when there's an election of a regional council member. It says that there's a maximum of 5 council votes. So the proposed change before you today and for discussion is that we want to change the policy manual to make it fair and equal, create parity by limiting the number of no confidence votes to 5. So in that sense, the number to elect is the same number to eject. So that's the first one. The purpose of it obviously is to create parity and consistency in the policy manual. So I think with that, if there's any questions or discussions.
Richard, if I could just add the reduction to 5 eligible members happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and when that was done, it just wasn't cleaned up to reflect it in the no confidence vote, which is why there's an inconsistency there, and we're asking you to review that today.
Thank you, Darren.
Any questions or comments?
I have one over here.
Yes, Mike Judge.
I'm sorry, you're good. This one's mine, right? When this was brought up in the regional council about the problem with Santa Clarita and San Fernando, right? How come, do they have to switch? Is that what their problem is? Because like we put for the region of Simi Valley, Thousand Oaks, and Moore Park, we elected our guy to be on the board, and he got elected by all 3 councils. That's just how we did it. So are they like in a permanent rotation that they were complaining about?
Yeah, the instance that you're talking about, there are two cities, they both have the same amount of council members. And given that they expect anytime an election would happen, it would likely end up in a tie, they have kind of an agreement that they would rotate back and forth. Now, they could, call those elections, come up with the tie-breaking mechanism and not necessarily do that, but they thought it'd be in the best interest of everybody to just create that rotational system.
We do have to go through our election process anyway, so we do post and do the right procedure. It just happens that they just send us one candidate and then we have to cancel elections.
Deborah?
Yes, thank you. I have a question more about, because there are some in our area, some of us general laws have 5 and 5, and we also have a city, I think, in one of the multi-cities that have 7 council members and a mayor that does not get to vote. And so then my thought was, how would we make sure that the 5 is the 5 that actually participated in selecting, maybe participating in selecting that district member? And then if there's a vote of no-confidence, has there been in the past a recording and expecting the same 5 to be the ones that vote on if they're going to vote on a no-confidence? If that makes sense, I guess, because I don't know if when we do a district election and we do it in our sub-region, if someone's recording the action and then bringing it back for the record. So it could be a different combination of those 5 within the 7.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Yeah, the policy manual allows for the mayor in any city with more than 5 council members to appoint the 5 voting members. I believe in multi-city district elections, SCAG is kind of oversees the process, so we do make sure that only 5 votes are casted in general. I can't speak to the history. I haven't been around SCAG long enough to know what has been done in the past in terms of no confidence votes and how they're kind of verified in that way.
If you'd like me to just add a little bit, the process for a no confidence vote is sort of it's an interesting and unique one, Councilmember Robertson. It starts with each city in that district having to adopt a resolution basically saying we would like a no confidence vote. So every city council would have to take their own independent action. And there isn't really a time constraint on that. It doesn't say within a certain period of it starting it has to finish. But once it does happen, it would then trigger this no confidence vote process to occur, in which case cities with 5, well actually in this case as presently written, cities, all of their council members could have the opportunity to attend. Now, there may be turnover, as you might imagine, between the election of a district representative and a no confidence vote. So it is not the case that the same parties that voted for the person in the first place are required to participate in the no confidence election. It's really just up to those who choose to show up. And so the purpose of this amendment is really to equalize the no confidence vote process, limiting it to 5, the way that the current process allows for the election by only 5 members of a council.
Okay, so if I understand you, the city I'm thinking about is San Bernardino, and so their 5 could change, but it just needs to be 5 that show up.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And we should note it was San Bernardino, well, actually it was the city of Highland that requested this initial change to go down to 5 because they're in a district with San Bernardino, so
yeah.
that they would have equal opportunity to
And
serve.
then just another point of clarification, Attorney. I know I serve as a council member, but I'm an elected mayor, so when you do reference me, I'm not a council member.
No, I understood.
I get to vote as one of 5, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So seeing no objection on this item, we'll take this forward as part of the package then.
Yes.
Okay. So moving on to the second item, we're dealing here with teleconferencing rules within the policy manual. There's a inconsistency in there right now that basically says that in multi-city district elections, teleconferencing is not allowed. And later on, at the very end of our policy manual, in the appendix, there's a little kind of how-to guide that basically says that teleconferencing is allowed. So this is kind of a simple change that we want to make it consistent, and the proposed change would say that teleconferencing is not allowed unless without written approval by the president. That provides some flexibility, but at the same time, it encourages in-person participation. So with that, if there's any questions on this particular item.
Questions, comments?
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Makes sense? Okay.
Thank you for the time.
So the next item that we have, and the third item we have, is a discussion on a complaint process for the Regional Council Policy Manual's Code of Conduct. A little background is probably in order in here and some historic perspective. Article 2 of the policy manual contemplates a process for complaints alleging violations of the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct is contained in Article 1. If you were to look at your, thank you, Kome, appreciate it. If you were to look at the packet that is before you today on pages, I think, 73 and 74, where we have the language, you would see that Article 2 currently has got a placeholder in it. It sort of says, to be added. And so here today, we're talking about the to be added part. The Code of Conduct in Article 1 is a code of conduct that applies only to SCAG representatives. SCAG representatives are essentially the elected or appointed officers of the General Assembly, the Regional Council, the policy committees, and other subsidiary bodies and task force of the Regional Council. Now, I would note, just as a side point, that there is a code of conduct that applies and a code of ethics that applies to SCAG staff and SCAG personnel in general. So this is sort of, think of it as the corollary that applies to the governing bodies. And what this code of conduct does for SCAG representatives, basically you all, is it identifies a set of prohibited conduct. And that conduct is identified in Article 1. And you can categorize that conduct into sort of two basic categories. Some conduct is prohibited by law, as you might imagine: discrimination, retaliation, harassment, things that the law says that we are not supposed to do. Some of the conduct has been more of an expression of SCAG's values. It talks about conduct that's not prohibited by law, but could reflect norms considered to be unethical or unprofessional. For example, we have a code of conduct provision that says you're not supposed to be unprofessional. Now, that's a great thing to have, but it also lends itself to a certain degree of ambiguity as to what that might mean. And so as we talk about how you might have a complaint process, I think that's an important concept to keep in mind, because in collaboration with the board, with our board counsel, Ruben Duran, your internal counsel, in consultation with Kome and Darren, have tried to develop a code of conduct complaint process that is consistent with having complaints be addressed, but acknowledges some of the nuances and flexibility. The Code of Conduct was last amended in 2018, and at that time, it was essentially compiled into one location in Article 1, whereas previously, I think, components of this Code of Conduct sort of found themselves in different parts of our policy manual and in different policies. So part of this was in 2018 to consolidate it into one location, but it was also deferred as to what would the process be once a complaint was lodged, and staff was asked to develop a policy. And so here we are today to have that brief discussion. So before we get into some of the goals that staff took into mind in developing this Code of Conduct complaint process, I want to just mention a couple of nuances that I think are important to keep in mind, in addition to sort of the concept of there being two types of conduct that's prohibited. The first is many of you and your colleagues hold your SCAG office as a regional council member or as a policy committee member by different procedures. Some of you are elected through district election processes. And in that case, there is a remedy process there. We were just talking about it, in fact, should people feel that you should no longer serve, and that's the no confidence process. Some of you hold your office here by appointment, whether it's by a CTC, we have a TCA rep, there's an AQMD rep. So some of you are appointed by another agency to this body. And that affects the remedies that could possibly be available should there be a violation, because if you're elected, there's a process for dealing with it. If you're appointed, your appointing authority really is the entity that has the right to determine your status. Additionally, while the policy applies and is supposed to talk about the conduct of SCAG representatives, it is possible a complaint could involve a non-public official who may have privacy rights, an employee, for example, who feels they were aggrieved, a member of the public who feels that they were aggrieved. So we have to take that into account as well. With those nuances and background in mind, the goal that staff has proceeded with in developing this amendment is to provide a concise, flexible process to address different types of complaints in a manner that is responsive to the complaint, is considerate in exercising due diligence, is respectful of the due process and parties' rights to an investigative process, and is flexible to address complaints based on the nature of the complaint being made. In sort of sum here, in contexts where, for example, there is prohibited conduct that could be prohibited by law, oftentimes the law requires an investigation to occur, right? If there is a complaint of harassment, of workplace discrimination, the law says we have to conduct an investigation. In other contexts, unprofessionalism, for example, that may or may not warrant some further, look depending on what the complaint is, but there should be at least something done to analyze that. So, with respect with what is before you today, the proposed amendment proceeds as follows. If a complaint were received, the executive director would review the complaint and conduct what we would call an initial inquiry. That initial inquiry is used to determine if an investigation is warranted, and it would be done in consultation with legal counsel, either internal counsel or, depending on the circumstances, potentially specialized counsel. If an investigation were deemed to be necessary or warranted, it would be conducted by a neutral third party in compliance with the law. As I mentioned, some types of complaints require a certain legal process to be followed. In addition, because it is important for an investigation to have a strong modicum of neutrality and a strong perception of fairness, confidentiality and privacy would be considered during the review and investigation for integrity of the process and subject to applicable law. Sometimes the law requires confidentiality to accrue to certain portions of investigative procedures. The result of an initial inquiry or an investigation would then be shared with the president, or, as I should note, in the event that the president were the subject of an investigation, sort of the next available officer in line, so that we could ensure that the findings were reviewed and considered. And then, noting the flexibility necessary, what would happen next is really sort of not defined clearly it's not defined in the policy, but it is intentionally left open because we would need to determine what further action, if any, can or should be taken. And that would be done through a process in consultation with the executive director, legal counsel, and the president or next available officer. And that could include further reporting to SCAG's governing bodies for review or action. So, for example, it could involve being reviewed by an executive committee or the officers, or it could involve being informing the appointing authority, depending what the nature of that investigative process yields. So that, in a nutshell, is what staff is recommending that we pursue. The policy, like I said, is intended to provide some parameters for us to address. We do think it is important from a risk management standpoint to have a policy here. For 4 or 5 years, there's been a placeholder. As you can imagine, a placeholder is sort of like a flag, right? It's like, hey, we're thinking about a policy, but we don't have one, yet we have a code of conduct. And I think it's important for us to fill in that gap. So I'd like to take a a break on this point to see if there's some discussion, questions, or any other thoughts as we proceed.
Anybody? David.
Thank you for that. I mean, a lot of this seems to me to be common sense, frankly, and at least what I've seen in my years, this is, as mentioned, a very fine body of leaders and people and staff, and everybody does the right thing. The only question I had is on the last item, just confirming, is that leaving up to one individual, whether it be the president or the next in line, to make a determination whether or not, if something, I assume in conjunction with legal counsel, whether or not something should go to the body or regional council or EAC or whoever it might be?
That's a very good question, Councilmember Shapiro, and I appreciate the thought of it. The goal of the policy is to allow some flexibility, and so it wouldn't be up to one person necessarily. It wouldn't necessarily be up to the executive director. I think the purpose of the policy is to confer a certain amount of judgment on the executive director and legal counsel to decide what the next steps might be without building in, without building in a very detailed process in this. Because as I said, some of these complaints could involve things that aren't necessarily legal issues, but they're more, ethical or normative issues. Legal issues have their own trajectory. So the goal is to have some judgment imparted on the executive director in consultation with counsel and the president as to what the next step should be. It could be consultation with the officers. It could be consultation with one of the governing bodies, but you need to keep something in mind. Because SCAG representatives, which is what this policy covers, are public officials, and this is a good thing. We are a state of transparency. We're a state of transparency laws. There is not a basis to have that sort of discussion often occur in other than an open session, right? And so part of this is to develop some judgment here so that if and when it does proceed in that way, it's intentional.
Thank you, and I'm fully supportive of this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I support the policy too. I'm just trying to think, is there, besides the president, it should be a body of two, I'm just, all knowledge of one person sometimes, I'm just thinking, especially that person's part of it, is there another mechanism do you need to put into this at all?
Yeah, and we did have some discussion on that, and I'd certainly welcome to additional observations, maybe from board counsel or anyone else, but we thought about that topic, and in fact, in 2018 or so, when this was discussed, that topic raised itself, and my thought was that it's better to not have that policy built into this, because doing so would likely create Brown Act open meeting requirements.
But Brown Act only comes into effect when you have more majority of a body, right?
That is correct, but go ahead.
Well, I think to the point that, and this is not something we haven't had to deal with, where some critical issue comes up. Sometimes it's not just the president we brief the leadership. So it would be the president, first vice, second vice in the immediate past. And so some of those issues can require more people around the table. I think maybe what we're trying to do is to have as much discretion in being able to maintain privacy and confidentiality where it matters. But if we do need
I get the discretion, but who holds the discretion power? And the reason why I say this, in my experience is, when I was chair for 4 years during COVID, as for the county, there's a lot of information. We had to make decisions all the time in the emergency situations. The one thing I always had to convey to my staff is sometimes there's the appearance politically versus the substance. And I'll give you a quick example. We were passing out homeless kits to the homeless. And my department was very happy with spending all this money they got for a grant on the homeless. But then when I did the calculations, and it being like $1,800 for a blanket and a backpack, whatever, for them, I go, that looks like you're doing a good thing, but politically, when you put this thing out, it's going to look very bad, because it looks like we're spending a lot of money. We're wasting a lot of money for what you get. And this is not a, legal matter like that, but I'm saying there's that context that necessarily you and your team don't have that we have as elected officials. Sometimes we may want to get in front of something versus responding to something, and to have at least a party of two politicos with you making that decision. I'm not trying to mandate it, I'm just saying to keep that in your back of mind with that discretion. If you don't have that political view on some things, not from a negative political way, but just the PR value, sometimes that perspective is different for your board members than would be for your team.
Mr. Chair, legal counsel, do you mind if I jump in here just to offer some perspective? Because I do recall the conversations with Mike as we were working on this policy, and I completely understand the concerns and the perspective that Supervisor Hagman raises. I do want to just refine a little bit of what you said with respect to the Brown Act, and that is, recall that the Brown Act will also apply by its terms to any subsidiary body that's created by an action of the legislative body, right? So if we were to say that the committee of the president and another officer, for example, would be the reviewing body in certain circumstances, SCAG has essentially created a Brown Act body there to whom the open meeting requirements, notice, public participation would apply. So we tried to balance that requirement against sort of what Mike has talked about, the nuance, the practical reality, the flexibility, to ensure that the president, if he or she chooses, in consultation with the executive director and legal counsel. The executive director and legal counsel aren't part of a body that's been created by this policy that's proposed. They are meant as advisors to the president, or, as you suggested, if the president's involved, the first vice president next in line, the second vice president, and so on. So it's not a perfect address, but it's an attempt to balance the reality of the Brown Act.
No, I'm just, for Comey or wherever the team is leading the investigation, just bring in the political side of things. If you're trying to protect legal standing and privacy discretion, and that may be different to us saying, hey, we need a press release out on this because this is going to come back reflecting us very poorly if we don't get in front of this. So if we don't take some action right now, even though, this type of thing. That's the scenario. I just want to make sure that someone has that perspective.
Totally get it.
That's going through that process with the team who's doing the background.
Absolutely. No, I understand.
And Supervisor Hagman, I appreciate that. I mean, this is exactly the kind of discussion we were, I think, hoping to achieve through this process. Having the discretion and judgment implies, I think, that we're going to, the folks that are going to be leading this understand what some of these are. And so gaining this perspective, I mean, I think nothing forecloses that kind of a discussion and consultation process to occur. So thank you very much for raising that issue. I just want to check and make sure, Mr. Chair, if we have other questions or
That's what I'm
comments.
looking for. Anybody else? Oh. Yeah.
Comey, or Mr. President, would you, so I guess that's what I'm stuck on, may be shared with the president. And that's the part that I'm thinking, there's, at some point within a period of time, even if it's unfounded accusations or something like that, it probably needs to be shared with the president. I mean, the board needs to be informed at some point, but a representative of the board, the president, probably should be shared within a period of time. Hyperbole. You get a complaint about one of the board members doing something, and you're doing your background investigation for 6 months, and because you think it's private and you don't want to share it, you don't with anybody, and then it comes up and it's been, oh yeah, we've been ongoing investigation for 9 months, it's going to look very poorly on the board if someone wasn't informed in consultation, taking direction from the board.
That's a great point. So
that may
you're
versus
suggesting
shall.
shall be shared with the president.
Understood. I've made a note to that on my notes to make sure that we carry that forward. And I
The only
appreciate
addition I'll make to that is if it's the president who's involved, then it would be
Yes.
the next
Yes.
succeeding officer.
And the draft that we have does account for sort of that flow down should there be a conflict.
I'll give you a practical example of it. We had a council person go in and shout at an employee and generally chew her out at a public meeting. She complained to HR, the investigation happened. I, as mayor, did not get involved until it was time to talk about the investigation with the council member, where he was counseled and told what he had to do about it. But it wasn't until the very end that I got involved at that time. It was all handled by the an attorney who was a private investigator.
Right.
Patricia.
I guess I'm looking at it a little differently from Supervisor Hagman. Is I see this as an insulating measure for us as well, right? To keep us out of it. I think it's kind of making the executive director take sort of the brunt of the exposure. Is that sort of the intent behind that? Or?
Well, there is some intentionality in that, Mayor Dawson, Luck Dawson.
Which I'm okay with, by the way.
Right,
I got enough exposure.
But I also think that the conversation that sort of you're raising and Supervisor Hagman has raised shows that there's an intersection between sort of the independence of having a proper inquiry or investigation be done at a bit of a executive staff level to allow for a vetting of facts, but at some point this information is brought to the attention of one or more members of this of the officer body or otherwise as things proceed. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about the judgment of your executive team and legal counsel in ensuring that a proper inquiry or investigation is done, and then at the right time it's, you know, raised, vetted, however you want to characterize it, with someone who has, you know, a policy, political acumen who can assist with sort of how we then proceed.
Yeah. And the fewer people that know about an investigation, the better, because you could ruin a person's reputation, and in the end, they're found not guilty of the action, but the reputation, they can never repair the reputation again. So the fewer people that know about an investigation, the better it is.
I tend to agree with that. A good investigation is one that has a neutral third party who can maintain the neutrality of that and ensure that it is viable when it's brought either, you know, at the end of a process or as potentially part of a litigation process, which is what this is also about, risk management.
All right. Okay, everybody happy? Is everybody happy?
So happy.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on that, and we've made some notes to that effect. So we're going to move on to a discussion on update to stipends. And as a bit of background, as you all know, regional council members and other committee members receive a stipend of $120 per meeting for the attendance at various SCAG events and meetings. As you also might recall, because the CFO has reported on this periodically, an audit report earlier this year reviewed stipend payments, and that report was presented to the audit committee in February. Generally, that audit report concluded that SCAG's process for stipend processing and payment generally complied with our policies. It made a number of recommendations to streamline stipend payments, and at that time it was also raised by a number of audit committee members that it was requested staff review our current stipend amount and other items to bring to forward for discussion. So just a small primer on what our current stipend provisions provide. As I mentioned, for regional council members and officers, there's a $120 per meeting stipend. Regional council members are entitled to 6 stipends a month, with 2 additional stipends available at request of presidential approval. And for the vice presidents, that number is 9 stipends, and for the president, that number is 12 stipends. And then any stipends in excess of that proceed to the regional council for their consideration of approval. For non-regional council members who serve on policy committees and other SCAG bodies, there is a stipend eligibility for their attendance at those meetings or at other meetings that may be requested by the president or executive director. However, for those individuals, stipends are limited to 4 stipends per month. So in developing some options for your discussion and consideration today, we wanted to flag a couple of the goals that were guiding staff in its options for recommendation. Number one, and then perhaps most importantly, is to encourage engagement by the members, right? We want our members, our regional council members, policy committee members to understand that when they're asked to participate in events, we understand the value and the organization understands the value of that participation and engagement. Of course, we want the amount to be paid and the frequency to be fair and proportionate to the participation. From an administrative standpoint, we also would like to ensure that your payments are timely received and that the process for doing so can be efficiently administered. And then to the extent that there are some savings through efficiency that can be gained, all the better. So with that in mind, the first option for you is a fairly straightforward one. It's to update the stipend from its present $120 per meeting to $135 per meeting. So a $15 increase, a 12.5% increase, and staff recommends this update. And we would, depending on our discussion today, proceed as part of the upcoming process to refine this language to incorporate that. That range is comparable with other agencies. You'll see below the third item, SCAG has the highest stipendable meeting policy for $150. I'd also note that for the CTCs, there are statutory limits as to what the stipend amount can be. So, as a JPA, we aren't subject to those, but we think it's also good to be sort of in the same range, if you will, because it provides a certain degree of legitimacy to be within that range, and so we feel $135 is within that. It also takes into account kind of the diminishing purchasing power over the recent years, and of course, if you'd like to discuss another amount, we're happy to do that. The second option, which SCAG also, or which your staff also recommends as part of an update, is to remove what we're calling SCAG clerked legislative body meetings. Think of it as this meeting, regional council meetings, policy committee meetings, GA. Remove those meetings from the current numerical stipend limits, and secondarily also cap those non-clerked events to what they presently are. So what that means is, as I mentioned, members have a certain number of meetings that they are entitled to claim a stipend for presently. We'll go back and use the regional council members as an example. 6 stipendable meetings a month, unless the president or regional council approves more. What we would recommend doing is taking out our SCAG's clerked meetings from that numerical limit. The effect of that would be that for attendance at these meetings, you would automatically get a stipend. It would not be subject to that limit, and it would allow for attendance at other non-SCAG clerked meetings, whether they were a meeting that the president or executive director asked you to attend. It might be going to an event that was important to SCAG. Those would be subject to the limit, but the current meetings that you attend for SCAG would not be. That would effectively allow for more meetings to be stipendable, and it would encourage participation. Additionally, we would propose a cap on that limit. So presently, the 6 meetings can be increased by 2 more meetings for regional council members by the president's approval. We would recommend removing that because you're going to be getting extra meetings anyway, but it would just take that out and it would make it potentially easier for payment to be achieved. So the goals of this are to promote quicker payment because the clerk would be able to confirm attendance at the meetings the way that Maggie is here. She knows who's here at this meeting. You wouldn't have to submit a stipend request for attending this meeting. It would streamline the administration and promote internal efficiency. And by removing the clerked meetings, it would encourage participation because, like I said, those meetings that you're now attending for SCAG would no longer be part of that numerical limit. I want to just take a pause and see if we have any questions on that one before I move to the next, because I know that one's a little bit, and I know Councilmember Yokoyama and I talked about that earlier last night.
Yeah, I just hearing what you're reporting on option number 2, I was always informed that the SCAG clerked meetings are stipendable, and I was told that we do not need to submit a stipend request for SCAG clerked meetings. So I do not submit stipend requests for EAC, for CEHD, or for RC. Already, I don't submit stipend requests for those 3 SCAG clerked meetings.
That is correct. That process would remain unchanged. We would automatically pay those stipends. The only change that's being recommended here is that we would no longer track those meetings against the limit, which is administratively a big win for efficiency, because we'll be able to automatically pay those without waiting for the additional meeting requests to come in. So those will be on a more kind of routine cycle, and will vastly improve the payments for the majority of our members. So yes, if you thought that was a change, it's correct. The clerked meetings would remain as is the current process.
And I apologize if I wasn't clear about that. That process would not require that. But again, the purpose of that is to ensure a prompt payment of those. And then for the meetings that are sort of outside the SCAG clerked meetings, there would be a stipend request come in, but it would not count against in terms of the ones that you've been paid for your SCAG meetings.
And then similarly, my recollection was any committee, formed by the body, formed by the president, such as like the scholarship committee, where there is a SCAG clerk involved, we do not need to submit a stipend request. And therefore, it would not be included against the limit.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Kurt?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the policy. I support the language. I'm the advocate on behalf of the board members because I sit on so many different boards. When you compare it to the regional transportation, like you said, it's capped at 100 and hasn't changed for a long time. I'm not sure when's the last time we changed this board's policy. But also, if you try to compare it to the San Diego COG, they're in San Diego. So obviously, by definition, when you're going to a COG or to a meeting in your local area, you're not traveling as far. I feel like for Jan and others that come the day before to come to a 3-hour meeting, obviously I'm advocating for a higher stipend amount for them because we do want them to participate. We do want to make sure that those have to travel. I know that SCAG takes care of some members the night before, but if not, you're leaving early in the morning, you're spending all day of the 3 meetings to come back, and we want them to participate. We want them to go to other events besides just the meetings as well. So it's hard to compare, and I know you did your best because there's not a lot out there. We were trying to figure out, we're on a new one, Deborah and I are on the IRAN one too, trying to figure out if we're going to have, there's not a lot of comparisons out there, but you have to look at what, are you getting participation? And a lot of times, especially since we're coming off the telecommunication, that we want to make sure we have not only a quorum, but also full participation by the body when they come to different committees, and we're getting their input on there. And to, frankly, the SCAG meetings are longer than most of the other meetings I go to in the board meetings. So I would advocate a scale at some point, and when that's $15 more or $20 more, or matching San Diego at $150, I'm good with all that. But also have a policy where every 5 years or 10 years you're looking at it and just kind of keeping pace. 'Cause I'm not sure when, Darren, do you know when the last time we actually changed this thing was?
I'm gonna guess it's been at least a decade, but I don't know the
I
exact.
don't remember either. It's always been the same. But
Yeah.
it's hard for us to sit there and pay ourselves more because we're politicals. So if you have it built into a policy where it just comes back for whatever, it's a little easier to do that. But thank you for the languages.
I appreciate that comment. I mean, that is something whether it's at sort of an EAC or staff level, we ingrain that, or we and we could certainly put some language in the policy that says, this policy will be reviewed every 5 years, and just, because sometimes institutional memory can fade also, right? I can understand that as being something to aspire to, so I've made some notes to that effect.
Okay. David?
Thank you. I agree with Supervisor Hagman and Chair Yokoyama on both their comments. I just want to compliment, and since I'm one of the ones who was bringing this up, I'll state it to Maggie and others. I want to compliment our finance department, everybody, and Maggie and everybody who's doing such a great job to straighten out and get this program simplified. I mean, the goal is to have it be simple. I don't want to keep track, I know we're supposed to, of every meeting that I go to or attend, or if I'm invited to attend, go to LAX or up to advocacy days or be on a committee. I just want to volunteer and do the work, and the stipend is a nice benefit. but not the reason I'm doing things. And financially, I know that these stipends are similarly to minor items, I say, in our city. When we have a large general fund budget and a budget, this is not about the dollars. It's really about, as you said, encouraging engagement and making things simpler. So I wanted to thank you for your work.
I just want to say I appreciate the comments. This is important to us, especially our clerk and finance teams on this. We pay stipends to over 100 members, so it's not your typical 18 board members or that you find in some of the commissions. When you count the regional council and the various policy committee members, it adds up to over 100 stipend payments that we would do every month. And so removing the clerk meetings and having that be automatic on a regular monthly basis, I think sort of streamlines that, because trying to wait to aggregate all the stipendable meetings that you all attend before we make payments sort of delays payments on the one hand. It confuses a lot of things on the other hand, and so it results in a lot of upset board members and frustrated staff trying to figure it out. So I think this is going to be a good cleanup for us to start with. We'll still expect board members to be responsible for their non-SCAG clerked events, but we would not feel as responsible for that because we would have hopefully paid all of the automatic SCAG clerked events without waiting for those to come in. So this is a really great efficiency move for us. You got a couple more?
Yeah, and I'll be very, very brief about this. And Comey, your comment and Councilmember Shapiro, your lead-in, I think, is to, sort of the importance of efficiency on this brings us to the third option, which staff also recommends, which is to change our timing for submittal of stipend requests only for those events that are not the clerked events. And just for background, the current policy says that submittals have to occur no later than 30 days after the close of the fiscal year in which the stipend was requested. So you could be submitting stipends 12 months after they are incurred. I understand for the clerk and the finance department makes it difficult to go back in time and sort of try to cobble together whether you've met the numerical limits. People's memory becomes foggy, paperwork gets lost, it winds up in the couch under a cushion or something, and so I think the policy we were proposing would significantly streamline that, and it would be that stipend requests must be submitted not later than 30 days following the end of the month in which the event was attended, or if not, they would be late and not paid. So the idea would be if you attend an event in July, you submit your stipend for that event no later than August 30th or whatever the last day of August happened. I guess it's the 30th. That would result also in quicker payments for the members, right? Rather than holding on to those requests and potentially submitting them 10, 12 months later, submit them within 30 days, you get them paid more quickly. So staff recommends that change. And then just finally, I want to mention that we did look at a sort of a fourth option. We're not recommending it, and that would be to replace the per meeting stipends with a flat monthly amount. Obviously, that'd be a lot simpler for staff, but it, sort of contravenes a couple of these goals that we talked about. Some agencies do pay flat rates, but it doesn't really operate in a way that encourages engagement. And it would also arguably not be quite as transparent, right? Because you'd be getting a flat amount, but no one would really know unless they submitted a records request as exactly which events you were going to or not. So, the packages you mentioned increased to 135, take SCAG clerked events out of the numerical limit, and require that stipends be submitted not later than 30 days following. And I think I heard from Supervisor Hagman that we maybe have a built-in sort of automatic relook at this every 5 years, which is easy enough to add. And with that, I'd sort of lay on the table for you, these are the recommendations we would like to proceed with making and see if there's any additional thoughts on the topic.
Comments? Deborah?
Yes, I The only thing I would recommend, because the time frames and on the one where you talked about submitted, we're going from it being up to the end of a fiscal year, whatever it is, to now 30 days. And I know I can appreciate that that's helpful for the finance and processing things. But on the other end, because for us as representatives, we have maybe a staff person that's handling or assisting it on our end of submittal things. And I guess I would propose that it not be at least 30 days, maybe it be 45 days. Because we got these cycles going, but depending on what I'm doing and getting back in time to make sure it, and I don't know if we've had any problems. I'm sitting here thinking, I don't even know if I've booked for things or not. That's not the issue. But timing is, for me, always critical, because then I have to deal with it at the city level with somebody who has to help process this. So that was just the only thought.
Thank you, Mayor Robertson. I don't know if there's, I have the CFO is going like this, so
Yeah.
I think that means no problem.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just said we went from 12 months to 30 days. It's
No,
like,
I appreciate the comment. Thank you very much.
45 days it is.
35 days?
45.
45, Okay.
Frank?
I think
I'd like to let Supervisor Hagman goes first, because maybe I'd like.
Mike, you have to
I'd like
talk
hear
into
what he
the
says.
microphone.
Frank, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
I'd like to hear what Supervisor Hagman says first. Oh.
I think you hear it from me enough. I'm advocating for, how'd you come up with the $15?
The $15, well, it was a very scientific process of, well, I mean, actually, it started with looking at what the other agencies are doing, right? And as you reflected and I noted, many of the transportation agencies are statutorily limited to a certain dollar amount. But SCAG, and then there was a 12%, and I'll let Kome,
Yeah, and we really couldn't match SANDAG. I mean, SANDAG is a $4 billion organization. They do more than just being an MPO. And so we didn't want to be in that realm. because I think that begins to.
From my perspective, they're at least in San Diego, and so when you go to their meeting, they're local. And you have people coming from 6 different counties into LA, and the people who don't show up are the LA folks, for the most part. So I'm just saying you have further distance to travel. And
We honestly, we took all of that into consideration. We also, the part of the history that we also had was at one point, the travel expense was also part of the consideration. So there's a per mileage charge that is also paid on top of the stipend, which used to be not separate, I think, in the past. So that's now part of the mix. So we still pay per mile. Arguably still is still like, I don't know how much that is now because it's limited by IRS. But that's an element of the distance. But your point about the time that's committed to the SCAG meeting, I think is well taken. And we felt like a 12% increase is doable and defensible. I think we would also take your point about making sure that there is periodic review. So part of the policy would be to have this reviewed every five or so years, so we're not like stagnant and waiting another decade before we talk about it.
Okay.
Frank? Mike?
I think that it, for reasons that have been expressed, and there's a number more that I can think of, and maybe there's people in the room that agree. I'd like to make a motion that we update the stipend from $120 to $150 per meeting. From $120 to $150 per meeting. That's my motion.
Are we, point of order,
We do that?
are we able to make a motion? 'Cause if
I would-
not, I mean, if we can, I'll second his motion, and I'll give you a reason why.
I would say the intent of today was to have a discussion and get
Yeah.
input, and then bring it back to EAC with a more robust policy with the language developed.
Okay.
So we weren't certainly looking for a motion today, but I think it's important if we hear that that's the sentiment of the committee, we certainly can move forward in preparation in that way.
And we would only be making a recommendation to the regional council to vote on it.
Yeah, this would be a motion to increase to 150 with, instruction to bring back that as part of the additional. So it would be, you're going to see this again. If that's the motion you would like to make, we could certainly take that
Well, I had
today.
my light, I had it up, not to make a motion, I had my light on for a comment.
If I may just offer a procedural tip, to the extent it would be helpful for the conversation and ultimately for staff to bring something back to the AAC with a more fulsome analysis if the numbers change, you could consider a motion and a second for a straw poll. Essentially, we're not going to take an official vote that's going to be recorded in minutes, that has any official action other than as direction to staff.
First, I got Clint wants to talk.
Can I, before you even go there or do that, can I make a comment of what I was, turned my light on for? Not to second the motion. I wanted to only ask a question in this conversation of what we surveyed. And I was looking at the survey, and you keep referencing transportation agencies and comparable. Then I see, though, that there is somewhat of, unless I miss, MTC is not Metropolitan Transportation, which is Northern California's the Sacramento MTC. And then I didn't know what SACOG was, but is that a COG that also which one?
That's an MPO in Sacramento.
Okay.
So you have two MPOs, MTC and SACOG.
Okay, so they also have the transportation element in it.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I ask it is because, again, to the point of Supervisor Hagman and to the fact of there are 6 counties versus 1 county, we have members who sit on our board, one of them the representative for Needles. For him just to get into our own county, within the county, it becomes very difficult to travel for him, and a number of them who have to make much further distance. And then when they travel to come into Los Angeles, our county, again, back with the numbers that we are over 38,000 square miles. The one county alone, ours, is over 22,000 square miles. So that almost somewhat limits the desire to try and participate unless we keep ourselves in the hybrid mode. And then that's the only way, but that doesn't really give you a level of actual participation as much as you get making adjustments for still the virtual involvement. And I think the same applies for Barstow and some of them that even go way beyond just to get to the core of the metro area of San Bernardino County. I can't speak for Imperial and others, but we know that we've dealt with the challenges of trying to get people here to the point that I think I think Cheryl at some point used to have to take a plane in to get here. And so that's, I think, a conversation is worth looking at a more reasonable, not just saying, well, San Diego's got so much money, or San Diego, because last night I said, before we ended, I was thinking, maybe we should change our view, and maybe we should start having a moment to see if we can bring San Diego into the fold of the 7 counties, and we'd be 7 counties, and we wouldn't have this fractured-looking situation going on. But that's for another conversation. So I just would want to say, for those points, it's a challenge. It's outside what all of the rest of us deal with, which is, I believe, a 50-mile radius. And for some of the folks in our county, it's beyond 50 miles. It is a day trip, and then a second day trip just to get here, if we really want to encourage participation.
It's entirely a prerogative, obviously. I mean, we'll take direction, but I just, again, we have not distinguished between people that will call in remotely from people that will attend in Sacramento, in Los Angeles. in person in terms of the stipend amount paid. So I want to make sure we note that also, because we will get most of our folks actually participating remotely now, given that we have that option.
Clint?
Thank you. So it's when we're talking about making these changes, the increase even to 135 and now the proposed 150. Do we know approximately what these changes will mean in terms of overall dollar amounts?
Cindy just let me know, so I know she knows the answer. We pay about 2,000 stipends a year. So each $15 increase would be about $30,000. So going from the current to the 150 would be about a $60,000 increase. Of course, comes from the general fund, which is paid from member dues, that is always impacted. So something we would look to address in the budget in future general fund budgets.
Jan?
Thank you. Comey just brought up something that really does have to be considered, and we're talking about an increase because people are traveling distances and it takes a lot of time, and I can understand that discussion. But when you have people who are participating by Zoom, do they get that same consideration? And I will tell you, while I was president, I get so aggravated when people would turn on their Zoom and then turn off their video. And it didn't make me think they were really participating, and especially when they would sometimes forget to turn off their audio. And you knew they weren't participating in the meeting. So unfortunately, this is something that we might have, this is perhaps a different discussion, but it's something that needs to be discussed, because are you participating or aren't you? And if we're here for a reason, a purpose, and if you get on and you go, okay, I get on my Zoom and now I turn off my video and cha-ching. And it just, it really is all the worst in political types of organizations right there. So somehow that needs to be addressed, I believe. And I'm gonna say something, because I was the worst. Maggie will tell you about taking care of stipends. I was just awful. But really, do we need to raise it to 45 days? What's the difference? 30 days, come on. We're all adults. We all know how to fill out a form or request reimbursement for something that we're participating in that we've all stated is very important. So I really think we need to, as I said, I think when you're participating remotely, if you're on Zoom, that maybe is a little bit different discussion and needs to be looked at. Now we're seeing, fortunately, now when we have to post where we are, that Zoom, more often than not, it stays on. Or the video does. But I think that is something at some point we need to take a look at.
Mr. President, can we ask council, can we have it bifurcated? Like $100 if you attend remotely, $150 if you attend in person?
We can write it however the desire of the body is. I don't know if there's other discussion maybe or comments from staff or from the body. Let me make just a couple of observations, because
Cindy wants to say something.
Pardon me?
Oh. Cindy wants to say something.
While in principle, I certainly see the merit, I will say it will take us back administratively. So think about for the clerk having to track who's in person, who's remote, what does remote mean if, there's a joint location where they're all meeting? What about the additional stipend meetings? Is that also going to be subject to the policy? Will people have to note whether they were in person or away? Does it matter if it was far or close? So I just caution on the complexity you know, weighing that against our goal of an easier administrative process as well.
The other thing I would add to that too is just sort of for what it's worth, a governance observation. Our regional council policy manual provides that the president has the authority to decide whether remote attendance at meetings is permissible or not. That is something that's inherent in our policy manual. And so, you know, the Brown Act allows for telephonic participation, but our bylaws are a little bit more stringent in the sense that it's really up to the presiding officer to decide whether that's appropriate or not. And so, you know, just to make sure you're aware of that provision as it guides your discussion and direction to staff, because I think it impacts on that discussion of a bifurcated determination.
Frank?
There's good points made about the considerations, for example, that we have hybrid meetings and our members participate in person and by Zoom, and I understand there's views on that, but as a chair of the CHD committee, I like the fact that we're valuing the encouraging of engagement, and as a chair, I like seeing the people in the room attend the meeting in person. But for the people that attend by Zoom, I'm just glad that they're attending as well, because I have a lot of absences. So every member who attends, whether they attend in person or they attend by Zoom, I look at it, you know, the glass is half full. I'm glad that they're attending, and I'm glad that they're voting. And some of, you know, my vice chair knows this, and Elizabeth knows this, some of the robust discussions during our committee meetings are coming from people attending by Zoom. So the valuation of the engagement and the attendance, I think it's just going to be too complicated for Cindy and her team to differentiate the method in which people attend, because I think there's some people who attend by Zoom who are more engaged and more involved than some people who attend in person. So I think the attendance is what I like to look at. I wish more people would attend, and those are just some of my thoughts. Overall, I value the attendance, and again, and also some people who attend by Zoom, they have reasons that we don't know. So those are my thoughts. I just think looking at the attendee, the members who are attending, I want to look at compensing them for their time. The ones that are traveling the furthest, sometimes we have meetings that, I know sometimes we might have a meeting that's an hour or less, but sometimes we have we attend a SCAG event, it takes up half a day or a whole day. So everything balances out, and I think we need to streamline it and just make it a certain amount of day, whether it's a certain amount of meeting, whether it's 135 or 150. And then lastly, my understanding of the stipend is if you attend 2 or 3 or 4 SCAG events in one calendar day, you only get one stipend.
That only applies for the regional council and policy committee meetings.
Oh,
So if you were to attend the regional council and policy committee meetings that day, you would get one stipend, but if later that day you went to another SCAG event, that would be separately compensable as a stipend.
Okay, so that's another way that things balance out. The committee members who are only committee members get a full stipend, and then those of us who are regional council members, we get the same stipend as them, even though we attend 2 meetings, but none of us are complaining about that, because in the end, we could just.
Okay, let's wrap this up.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing, and then we'll take the vote. The stipend comes out of what your dues are that your city and county pay. So if we get too high on the stipends, you may get your dues raised. Think about that. There's a motion from,
Just one last comment, if I might.
for you, I will.
Thank you.
You're the last one.
I'm the last one. I just want to let you all know, of course, the business community is struggling with this same issue, right? We want our employees in the office because they can learn things from body language, from making deals around the corner. It's important to be in the room. On the other hand, the next generation values being able to do remote work.
Right.
And then the double whammy, I think, for regional council, for the SCAG board in particular, is our focus is reducing VMT and greenhouse gases. And so for us to set a standard of flexibility, I concur with the Honorable Frank that I think the way you're doing it now, as hard as it is, but to allow folks to participate as opposed to requiring them to be in the room, it is the future in all aspects. So thank you for allowing me to add that.
The motion is to, Deborah?
Oh, I was just going to say, I thought we talked about it would go to.
No, what was your motion?
I didn't make the motion, I just seconded it, but I'm going to withdraw.
Second, who made the
my-
motion?
I'm going to withdraw my second.
I think this.
So would somebody restate
suggestion
the
was to do
motion?
a straw poll to understand.
This would be a straw poll to determine whether to use $150 per meeting as the metric to pursue in our drafting versus 135.
Okay.
And that's what is on the floor, I
Since
believe.
it's a straw poll, thumbs for all those that are in favor.
Wait.
Yeah, let's
Raise your hand.
I withdraw the second.
If you're in favor of $150.
Just taking a
we
straw
recommend-
vote. I didn't second it. I just withdraw the second.
Eight? Okay.
That's good enough.
That's good enough, okay. Continue on with the rest of the program.
Thank you all very much for the discussion today.
If there's one thing I can ask real quick, we had an issue with our city attorney when we had our last election for our SCAG representative. Maybe you remember this. There was something about, he thought it was violating the Brown Act by having all the council members vote on this online. Can we get something in writing so I could calm my city attorney down that this is not a violation of the Brown Act when we elect our SCAG members?
I had a long conversation with your city attorney, Mr. Judge, and I'm happy. In fact, I gave him something in writing.
Cool,
but
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Comey.
I think in the interest of time, I'm going to cut straight to Bill. I know he has a flight to catch. So we'll go to Bill. He'll set some level for us for getting into our strategic plan discussion, and then I'll do some opening comments before Lori and Debbie present the status of the plan.
I am so fortunate to follow that discussion. But I did bring a single trivia question for you to bring it up. So let's see if I can read this correctly. If I was a bad fish doing time for going the wrong way, but just 40 ounces from freedom to enjoy a walk among scarlet begonias, to assess what I got, to conclude it's all the same in the end, what band would I be a fan of?
Sublime.
Sublime, right? I hear they have a pretty good drummer. There we go. That was fun.
Now, it might not be common knowledge that we have celebrity in the room with Mr. Goodman as the drummer of the band Sublime. So
You can listen on Spotify. It's all very good.
Doing time?
That was excellent, by the way. That was really good.
Well, I adapt my trivia to the audience, so that was fun to do. All right, I'm supposed to talk to you a little bit about regional governance and your emerging role, because it's changing. And if I just think about how the role of MPOs and councils of governments are changing, they've changed actually a lot with my career, because I started as an attorney in 1997 with the League of California Cities, and that was the year that SB 50 was adopted. That actually gave regions a lot more programming authority over the state STIP, or the State Transportation Improvement Program. And then I was working at the League of California Cities, negotiating SB 375 that gave us a lot of, actually I think it elevated and spotlighted the role of what your regional transportation plan does. And even though it was a lot about climate change, I've always said that SB 375 was maybe more about conversation change, because it really put a different spotlight and focus on what you were doing. And then through SB 1, and then what I'm about to say to you now, I feel a little uncomfortable saying, but my board members have told me to say this. It was largely because of our work at CalCog that you got REAP $1, which led to REAP 2. So that big budget you have with the big spike, you're welcome. So, so I kind of feel like, you know, my career is arced with your emerging role as a stronger voice in, and a stronger vision in what is becoming and happening in your region. And I think we struggle with this because you have two roles. You have your role as a metropolitan planning organization, which is, you know, you have to develop a regional transportation plan. It has to be based on this model. It has to do this and this. And the state has required a climate, you know, very directory, a climate goal. At the same time, you're a council of governments, and you serve your members. And you do what I call bottoms-up regionalism, right? And when you think about how you do your regional transportation plan, the first thing that you do is you talk to all your cities, all 191 of them in the 6 counties. And you say, what is in your future? How can we match our plan to what you're doing? And so you're balancing these two things. And I've balanced in my career. I've thought a lot about local control, because I worked for the League of California Cities, and what regional governance is, and sometimes the tension between that. And I've come to a conclusion that I want to share with you, is that effective regional governance is essential for local control. It sounds oxymoronic a little bit, but let me just think about this for a second. We all have transboundary issues, right? I mean, whether it's traffic or it's coyotes or whatever it is. I mean, you know, I know that in the South Bay, coyotes is an issue, and South Bay COG actually has a little issue that they deal with. So you all have these transboundary issues. And if you don't have an effective forum to address those transboundary issues, who will do it for you? The state. The state will fill the vacuum. So when I go back to thinking about what the League did on SB 375, it was precisely this point. It was, do we want the state to do it for us, or do we want to have a say in our own regional transportation plans and you know, give us a target, but we'll figure out how to do it for you. And so threading this needle about, you know, serving your members and having a regional vision and meeting state mandates is kind of a struggle for us. But I think that effective regional governance is particularly necessary in California, you know, the 3rd largest state. Actually, the SCAG region is about the size of Kentucky, and the population combined of Michigan and Maryland. So I think regionalism makes a lot of sense in California, because California is really big. And it makes sense that, you know, I know SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and their issues are a lot different. Or Fresno, or the Tulare County Association of Governments. And so it makes sense that the state would want to flex its policies in a way that's regionally specific. And this is the role that you're emerging into. And I think it's kind of, so you kind of have this balance that's happening. And the state's asking more of you through the REAP programs, through CMAQ and STBG. They're saying, we want more of you. In the latest budget deal, the TIRCP, $4 billion over the next 2 years are coming through the TIRCP program. And in this case, it won't be SCAG, but it'll be the 6 commissions that will have a lot to say about how that money is spent. And so I just think that when you're thinking about these issues and what your role is as a region, it's a balance. And it's a balance between your role as an MPO and your role as local officials and your role as serving your members as a council of government. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense to take a new issue on, and sometimes it doesn't. I think you're such a unique forum that people are always bringing new ideas to you, right? Maybe it's to set up an earthquake warning system, or maybe it's something crazy that doesn't sound like it's germane to your mission, which I think maybe 5 or 10 years ago, people would have said, what does SCAG have to do with broadband? And now look at what you're doing. But at the same time, you can't chase every one of those ideas, right? Because the regional transportation plan is a lot of work. So I've talked to, sometimes I do strategic retreats with some of our members, and I talk to them a little bit about mission control, right? You have a mission, but what types of projects make the most sense for your mission? And maybe a lot of them do. And then what kind of resources do you have? And where can you have the most influence and have the most impact for the, what is it, the 15th largest economy in the world? Now, SCAG is the biggest MPO in the galaxy. That is true. But one of the effective things that you bring to your communities, I think, is not only this sense of having a regional vision, but also an economies of scale, right? I mean, Comey was talking about all the small communities that don't have capacity. And things like you do, like Toolbox Tuesdays, which I'm a big fan of, is really an education tool to get more resources out there. But grant writing, doing the data that you're providing to the communities, if each one of those communities did it on their own, it would be so much more expensive. So I don't have any answer for you here, except that all 49 of our regions do it differently, right? They all have different powers. Some are COGs, some are MPOs, some are both. So they all have, and it's because in California, our regional governance system has grown up organically. And so while you're thinking about your own governance structure and future, you got to stay true to your history, but you also have to keep an eye to the future. It's a tough balance. So I think what it really wanted me to do is introduce this notion of mission control, you know, because you are the size of Kentucky. You have a big population. You have a border. You have the biggest ports. And you put out better movies than Michigan and Maryland. So you have a lot of influence in this world as a region. And what Comey said is like, he said do no harm, but I think your also mission is a little bit more than that, which is augmenting and facilitating, helping facilitate this region's success. Good luck with that. I always like watching it. Does anybody have any comments or questions? That's my statement from afar, but I'm happy to hear reflections or thoughts about that.
Sure, I'll just, I mentioned what I was excited about is trying to work and get cities to collaborate. And I think you emphasized what my idea was, very eloquently, and you have a lot more experience statewide, but that is my goal, is to use Orange County, which typically has been very prohibitive as far as doing the work that Sacramento would want us to do, or sometimes the work that we need to do because we want to do it a different way or what have you. But as an Orange County elected official, I am trying to be at the forefront of talking about this collaboration and regional work, especially in Orange County. And if we can be an example, which we were in North Orange County in building 2 navigation centers, and if we can do it, you know, as repellent as we've been with Sacramento, then I think a lot of other cities can do it, regions can do it, and so on. A lot of cities doing a lot of different things in this state, so much variation that it's really hard for Sacramento to do the work that they need to do to facilitate local issues. So who better to do the job than us? But we have to figure out how to do it. So your expression of regional work being essential, especially in this state with so many different coastal, inland, you know, northern, southern, it's absolutely essential. So thank you for those comments.
Another way I like to say is, just listening to you say that, thank you for that, is you're the bridge between a state goal and the local condition. And you know, that's a real, because if you're telling people what other people do, you often get, anybody ever, oh, that's just another layer of government, right? But you're not. You're not a layer. You're a bridge, and you know, I think everybody kind of concurs that, you know, they don't want Sacramento telling them what to do every second of the way. But they also have some trust in Sacramento because they elect those officials to do those things, right? And there's a disconnect often between what people vote for in Sacramento and who they vote for city council. And you've got to bridge that gap. It's a tough job. Well, now you're going to get to talk about your strategic plan. I want to thank you guys and thank President Brown for letting me join. I'm a regional nerd geek, and so I actually loved all those conversations that you just had. So thank you for letting me join you the last couple of days.
Thank you, Bill. I have to say, we're on the phone with Bill quite a bit, just to make sure that we're on the same level, and he has conversations in Sacramento with those policymakers there. And I remember actually on the 2 occasions with both REAP 1 and REAP 2, but especially on REAP 2, I was in a meeting in Sacramento, and I was driving back to the airport when Bill called and said, could you spend $250 million? I'm like, yeah, we could. And that was the conversation about REAP 2. And that was before the trailer bill was put together, and so we have these insights about what's coming by keeping in touch with Bill. So he's always been a great resource for us. We are going to transition to I think Bill set the stage for what we want to discuss with the strategic plan. The update to the plan become necessary just on the natural. Our existing strategic plan was adopted in early 2018, but most of that work was done in 2017. So all of the information that led to or fed into the plan was from 2017 timeframe and adopted in 2018. So on the natural, we've been 5 years since that plan. And if you have been paying attention, I think the world changed in the last 5 years quite a bit. And so the context for our discussion today is understanding that we have a lot of changes to consider as an agency. In the main, our work, what we're charged with by statute, still remains the same. We're a planning organization. We still do the long-range plan. The long-range planning has some different conditioning to it. But as an organization, as we think of ourselves, we wanted to be sure that we are in tune with the changes that are around us. We have the housing crisis and our expanded role in housing. Before REAP 1, we didn't have a cent from the state to do housing, even though we were charged with RENA. That money was taken out of the general fund every 8 years to do RENA. It wasn't state funded. Now we have a full-fledged housing program that Elizabeth runs. We've taken on broadband as an outgrowth of the issues that came out of the pandemic, and that is something we are not funded to do, but we had a natural sort of capacity to lead the discussion of broadband. Now, having been at Caltrans 29 years, been in charge of 50,000 lane miles and 13,000 bridges and owning and operating a $1 trillion asset, I loved coming to SCAG where I didn't own and operate anything. and I kind of still like it, but it's even more fun to have influence. And I think that's really where we come in, is we have influence around the things that condition our economy in Southern California. And so we want to make sure that we bring our best selves to that influence as staff, but mostly as a board working for you, because ultimately it's your decisions that we execute. And so this is what the strategic plan was intended to do. We needed to clarify our strategic focus. I think that's really one of the things we set out to do with this plan. Bill talked about mission control. Like I said, because of the changes that we've seen in the world, we've seen some mission creep. Getting to broadband, we're doing housing, and Mayor Robertson would want me to do water to the nth degree if I could. And so there's that tussle. People are talking about energy because we are talking about energy and transportation and energy and housing. So there is no limit to what we can bring to the table. And knowing that our best work is done in aid and extending the capacity of our local agencies, we want to make sure that we refocus and identify what our strategic priorities will be, at least in the next few years, given the changes that are in the world. So we started out with this process as a way to educate. One, to educate ourselves about what our stakeholders, and understanding what our stakeholdership is, what our stakeholders want from us, what they expect from us. Now, what they want from us and expect from us doesn't necessarily amount to what we have to do, but it is a good thing to know and connect to it so that we can manage those expectations or delight them by meeting those expectations. But also a two-way education by also helping to use this to inform stakeholders about what we do and who we are and what we can or cannot do, such that those expectations are truly managed and maintained, and credibility maintained. So that is this sort of the basis for this conversation. We're going to try and keep you no more than another 5 hours, but they're paying attention. Good. We're going to probably be done within the next hour, maybe, or so of conversation. But we want to take the moment to walk you through where we've been, and we've been fortunate to have both Lori and Reza work with us. The lead on this work has been Debbie Dillon, our Chief Strategy Officer, and she has been on top of this for the last 2 years now, maybe 18 months. And so I just want to make sure that you get a context of where we've been and why we're doing this and why this is important. Ultimately, we want to have a plan adopted that will guide the strategy of the agency for the next 5, maybe 6 years. Come to the EAC and the regional council in the next maybe 6-7 months from here. So with that, I'm going to introduce Reza. Are you going to go first?
Actually, I was going to say, Chair Brown, if time permits, we only need about an hour, like Comey said, hour and 15 minutes. Is it a good time to take a break? We've been sitting for about 2 hours.
It's an excellent time.
Yeah.
Take a break, yes.
Well, let's take a break and can come back to both Lori and Reza.
Yeah.
Where's Mr. Chair, Mr. President? There he is.
If you're not here, raise your hand. We're going to get started.
So is everybody good if we start?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So to continue with Kome's opening comments, this next session is really meant to be a conversation. We are here to share with you a bit about the work we've been doing, some of what we have learned, some of the early actions that are underway, and as much as anything, get your feedback. So the plan for this presentation really consists of just a couple of key elements. A review of what we learned through discovery, challenges and opportunities. A discussion with you of some of this early work around emerging roles, strategic priorities, and values. And then lastly, to talk about a plan going forward. A couple of points just to make as a level set to get started. This work was really, the context for this work as it began was really set by Kome and very strongly underscored the notion of education, building on what he'd said earlier. His key interest in us undertaking this work was to learn from all of you, to learn from the broader community of external stakeholders, to learn from employees. And to take that information and to understand the implications and what it means for the agency going forward. So our approach to all of this was around educating ourselves, and talked with many of you through the process, and really to say that this work has been largely a team effort. We have been working very closely with the executive team, with the management team, and hopefully what you're going to see is not a reinvention, but it's an evolution and a honing of work that's underway, of precedent, of policy, of approach, but that the ultimate end state of this work is really around alignment and clarification. So how is it that we can help provide a roadmap for the next 5 years to give direction to the work underway? This slide reflects the framework, sort of the overall framework of the way we're approaching the strategic plan. And it's really principled on 3 key issues: why, what, and how. So beginning with this idea of clarification around vision, mission, values, and behavior that informs strategic priorities, ultimately that leads to objectives and key results. So everybody knows this is what our priority is, this is what we're going to do to achieve it, and then this is how we're going to get there. To give you a sense of what has informed what we're going to share with you, a quick overview of who we talked to. We talked to over 150 people over the past year. We met with 13, 14 EAC members. We distributed a survey to the regional council in which we got 25 responses. We conducted 27 interviews with internal SCAG management. We had 6 employee focus groups in which we had over 50 employees participate. We also did individual interviews and roundtables with a number of external stakeholders. So this discovery exercise was really designed to give us a 360 view, inside out, outside in, up down, bottom up, and the information that Reza is going to share with you around the emergent themes and opportunities from that is a result of that work. It's a synthesis of that work. And so what we're going to share with you is sort of a high-level report out of what it was that we learned.
Sounds good, thanks. So just building off of what Lori said a little bit, you know, if you think about what strategy is or a strategic plan, it's basically your response to a context, right? That's what it is. You're at one point, you have a series of desired outcomes that you want to achieve. Your strategic plan helps you navigate the context in between to get you there successfully. And Lori went over this long list of folks and stakeholders that we've spoken to get that context. Knowing that context, which we framed up in the next slide I'll share with you. Actually, we can go there now. In terms of emerging themes and opportunities, this is essentially the context that you have to navigate as SCAG to continue delivering on the mission and vision and, you know, the things that you want to achieve, right? So I'm going to go through this. I believe I think this starts on page 84 of your packet, in case this is a little bit too small for you to be able to see and you want to read through it, so you can track along there. But when we look at the emerging themes, you know, what the context is out there, it falls into 7 high-level sort of categories, right? 7 buckets. And we can further group these into a smaller series of buckets. The first one is around recalibrating SCAG's role. So I'm gonna take a deeper dive into this in the next 5-10 minutes, right? Into what that means. But essentially, what this is about is, hey, the context, the role that you play has been shifting in the eyes of some of your stakeholders. You're already doing other things outside of your general, you know, or let's say traditional purview. What is the opportunity? The opportunity becomes, let's clarify that, again, as Lori was saying, let's get really clear about what it is that we're taking on, revisit that stuff, and commit and say this is really what we're going to deliver to. So there's a lot more there we'll cover in a second. The second bucket here is about building the capacity of the SCAG organization. So a lot, you know, the staff members, the organization that conducts the analysis and planning and all these other things that happen within SCAG. And this is organizations always have to go through an exercise of continuously rebuilding, developing, and so forth, because as that context changes, the organization begins to move out of alignment with that context, right? And we can see that SCAG has grown significantly. Your budgets have grown. You're doing a lot more work than you used to be doing, right? It's natural for that misalignment to have occurred to a certain level, right? So what this bucket is talking about, first off, is looking at the internal processes. So emerging theme is around internal processes and systems beginning to become a little bit of a drag on efficiency. And then the bureaucracy that you have to manage complicates the distribution of resources to jurisdictions and so forth. And we're hearing this from your stakeholders that need to access that, right? So the opportunity that SCAG has is, let's identify the highest level priority and the highest priority processes and technical systems that are going to lead to that greater efficiency, and let's re-engineer them with the outcomes that we want to achieve in mind, right? The third item here is collaboration among SCAG staff becoming somewhat inhibited process around, potentially due to process and structure. You probably hear the term siloing and things like this. This is not a significant issue, or I wouldn't say anything on this is an issue, things to pay attention to and to work towards, but there's opportunity for the organization to think about its linkages, think about its processes that enable cross-functional collaboration, so we can get all these elements of planning. I'm just going to use planning generally, right? It's not about the planning organization. Just all the things that SCAG is doing, getting everybody talking to each other, right, and a little bit more effectively. The next piece is about prioritization, and really the macro level here is staff are feeling a lot of pressure. Staff are feeling a lot of pressure. A lot of that has to do with them being pulled in multiple directions because the purview is expanding, as well as feeling a little bit of pressure from the members, the RC, right? And when they're communicating and so forth. So what can we do here? Setting clear priorities, re-examining focus, making sure that they know exactly what they need to be focusing on, and also looking at workload allocation and resources. And then the next emerging theme here, still in building the capacity, is SCAG has a strong culture, very collegial. People love to work at SCAG, but underneath, there's probably opportunity for a little bit more honest, frank conversation, more trust building, right? So what we want to do, or what SCAG has the opportunity to do, is focus on your values. You mentioned behavior. That's really the bedrock of your culture. Commit to what are those key values that SCAG has, and then begin to lead, and that goes for everybody in the room, modeling those behaviors. So we're consistent and cohesive throughout the entire organization with regard to what we think is important, how we approach the work. So that's your role, sort of calibrating that, building the capacity. The next bucket has to do with having an impact, or how you demonstrate the impact of SCAG is a different way to phrase that. Any stakeholder that SCAG has, I encourage, I'm sure you've all having multiple conversations with everybody, but anytime you're having a conversation with a SCAG stakeholder, the one thing you'll hear from them is, I want more engagement. I want my priority issues to be front and center, right? Those are the types of things that they're coming to you for. So bringing attention to their priorities, obtaining the resources that they need. So this is never going to go away. It's always going to be there. I know it's a balancing act, but there's some opportunity to look at the investment in building the organizational capacity that allows you to deepen the relationships and communicates to your stakeholders the level of engagement that you're hearing them, that you're acting on their behalf. It's not about whether you're doing it. Some of it has to do with them understanding that you're doing it. And then the last piece here is there's folks that are, investing. There, all these different entities that are funneling money through SCAG and so forth, right? And the work that obviously the staff is doing, that you're all doing. Do we have clarity around the impact of that, right? So the theme around this is, looking at performance measurement, accountability, things that, is there a way, or, what can we do to capture that impact and communicate it that tells our stakeholders about the great things that you're doing and the impact that their dollars are having and the impact that everybody's efforts are having? Okay? I know there's a lot of talking here and there's a lot of reading, sorry. It's dead silent.
So, does that resonate? Is there anything that jumps out at you guys as like, I don't understand it, it's hitting a false note? Does it all feel consistent with your shared understanding of the organization?
To the president, I say all the big categories are good, and it's hard with strategic plans because you put these ideas up there, and at least for me, I'm the practical person. Okay, so how do we organize underneath those big ideas? How do we become the innovation leader, for example? What does that mean? In what categories and what different things? Are we going to be advocating the state to take certain policies so we can be innovative? Or are we going to wait to see what the state says, here's funding for you, now figure out how to do broadband? That's one reactive, one's proactive. So I guess that's part of how you build that into that strategic plan.
Yeah, actually, thank you for that, Supervisor. I mean, that's going to be a part of the next piece because, yeah. And,
There are two questions.
Lucy?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
And maybe I've jumped ahead without looking ahead, but one of the trend issues that I'm watching closely is how state and federal officials at both state and federal government are tending to default and delegate to administrative agencies. And that trend line, if you look ahead, means that at some point they're going to delegate to SCAG to be an enforcement agency, not just a convener of people. And so I was wondering, as part of the folks that you talked to, are you hearing any of that we should be prepared for that, or is it a parking lot issue that we need to deal in the next strategic plan?
No, absolutely hearing it, and actually I'm going to go right there in a second because the roles that SCAG plays are shifting. You mentioned one of those trends. That's right now coming to you, and there's several other ones that you've kind of evolved into. I mean, Bill he stole our thunder a little bit. I told him that as he was leaving. This whole idea of mission creep, right? And mission, being able to control that. Another view of that is, hey, it is creeping. We are already doing these things. Our purview is already expanded. Our budget is already expanded. There's all these. Now let's just get clear, commit to it, and plan around it, and hit it. So there's going to be a number of roles that I want to walk through and to see how that resonates with you all. Is there one more question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a comment with respect to the 17 tribes that are part of the SCAG region. Well, as you well know, in terms of jurisdictional authority, much of tribal government is with the federal role, with the exception of gaming, for example. That really demonstrated a state's role, and that was only because legislation, as it was produced and read. It required tribes to acquire compacts within the respective states. But in the assessment, first of all, I'm glad to be on this committee and this board and be part of it, because I think it's very important work. And I guess I can say I speak for the 17 tribes in the region, because I was unanimously selected to represent them again on this committee. So if you want to clap, that's good, because I'm pretty happy about that myself. And but the vocal point is that there's a cross connection between state government, tribal government, county government, and so forth. Well, tribes as tribes, they're actually sovereign governments themselves. So in some respects, my job has been a little bit difficult, because sometimes a tribe may not want to apply for something at a county level, because quite frankly, they feel they're not superior, but the sovereign authority engages them to contract directly. And here's some examples. Some tribes, even on their health care, some tribes in this region, and our tribe's one of them, we have contracted directly. We've bypassed the State Office of Health. We went directly to the Rockford, Maryland Indian Health Service direct. So they consider that what they call sole source contracting or self-governance. And in some cases, tribes have really excelled on that. Agua Caliente, in your region, ma'am, they've really moved forward in a lot of big ways. Our tribe, we've done some as well. And every tribe, in terms of its varying degrees of status, have gained other opportunities. So sometimes my role and to advocate services of SCAG's rather difficult, because they're either on the way to do it or they're on the way of cooperating. I'm not saying it's always negative. I'm not saying that at all. But I think my role is to inform that body consistently of what's out there. And right now I'm working with the economist, Ms. Moreno, on that new grant we just got. And that's been, quite frankly, we've had several Zoom calls on that. And I'm going to present a formal presentation to TASN, and then also to the what I refer to as the river tribes. And when I say river tribes, I'm talking about Chemehuevi, Fort Mojave, Crit, all those tribes along the river. Because when we had the re-election of my status as the board officer, we had the meeting in Chemehuevi specifically to include the river tribes and the Tassin tribes. So that's just my comment, observation. I'm just saying that I'm not complaining or bragging. I'm just saying it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes to convey some of this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I just want to add to. I think it's important what Andrew's talking about. It's one of the imperfections of our work to date, I think, is figuring the best interaction and the best engagement with tribes, understanding that there is that sovereign nature of tribes, and yet when we do programs that come down from federal and state, we're conditioned to look at cities and counties and local jurisdictions, and so there's a whole different interaction. So I think we have to, as we think as a metropolitan planning organization, there is a federal requirement to make sure that we're interacting with tribes. And so I just want to highlight what he said, that this is not taken lightly. It's an essential element of our work that I think continues to be a growth area for us. And it was my privilege to go out to Saboba the last time to have a conversation before your election. So yeah, so the applause was rightly well placed.
Art, yeah, no, and I just want to add to what Andrew said with regards to where they went just for purposely to the river tribes as well, because in addition to our structure and our interaction with the 17 tribal governments that we have in our MPO region, then when you get into the SCAG or the other MPO region and you're crossing the state lines, it becomes another level of collaboration, which I think on behalf of our tribes and also on behalf of those that are along the Colorado River, once again, I don't know if we do a collaboration beyond beyond our border, our state border. So the reason I'm aware of it, and I told Andrew, is because when we brought the governments to our SCAG table, I was one of those, along with Mr. Roberts, who went out and visited 17. And he and I have been kind of going back because we're trying to figure out, we now say 16 tribal governments when it was 17 to begin. And then he asked me earlier, he said, you do a lot of travel, because then when you're dealing with the water matters, you go beyond just our state boundary now, because there's a whole nother federal structure that's in place. And so to what he adds, and then also just what I heard as we started here, is it's good to note it if you want to, bring it current, but it's kind of been a ongoing theme through all the time. It's always kind of what the role of the NPO is tasked with versus what, as the bodies and people come in, wanting to shift and pull as to what they think should be the purpose of the structure. So thank you.
So what's exciting about doing this work and being able to focus on the right side of the slide around this idea of what are the opportunities, right? Because the reveal of what isn't working or what needs attention provides an opportunity for change, provides an opportunity for improvement, which is why we're all here. And what I love about these last two comments is that it really comes up again here in this idea of investing in building the organizational capacity for relationship. And what does that mean? And how do we take a magnifying glass and really look at that notion of collaboration and relationship in the context of the sort of emerging trends in the way that you all are working to understand how might we need to build capacity differently within the organization, both from a work practice side as well as from potentially a skill set and resource side. So that's just one example of what comes up in this area. I'm going to hand it back to Reza, and he's going to talk about this sort of really critical emergent issue around role, because it reflects this sort of tension, right? This push-pull between what we can do, what people want of us, what we're mandated to do, and what's possible. So with that,
Yeah, thanks. Just before I leave this slide, just one item that I want to bring up. When it says opportunities for action, it doesn't mean that action isn't already occurring there. It just means it's a focus area and we're going to go do it. So there's several things, if the first bullet, the fourth, fifth, those are all things that are already in play around setting priorities, reaffirming values, looking at the role. So I don't want to, mischaracterize this as something that's not happening already. But let me jump to this piece around roles, because I think it's really, really critical. If we were working with, let's say if we were doing a strategic plan for a pharmaceutical company, a for-profit pharmaceutical company. Lori put up that initial slide, right, that had the how, the what, and I always forget the order of that. Thank you. And there it is, right? You have your purpose, and along the path, what you want to achieve, that's your vision and mission of it, however you want to characterize that, and your guiding principles, which are how you do that work, like how you work together, which is culture, right? And then you can straight up go to strategic priorities, which are somewhat enduring, and then objectives, key results, all that kind of stuff, right? The pharmaceutical company is going to have full control of where they want to direct their energy, and they have a go-to-market strategy, where they think they can have impact, make money, and this is the flow of their strategic plan. When we look at public sector, it becomes a little bit more fuzzy or complex, because you have legal mandates that then limit or put boundaries around what you can choose to do or not do, right? Well, that gets even more complicated when we're talking about a regional entity. Because, and Bill brought this up, and preaching to the choir, you all know this, if an issue emerges, like broadband was brought up, by Bill just a few minutes ago, right? If something emerges that doesn't have a home and it's critical and it's regional, there's going to be an expectation on you to take it, whether it was a part of your strategy or not before, right? So in this flow that you see between, well, what happened to it? It went away again. Okay, between the vision, mission, and all that stuff and the strategic priorities, there's this role definition that has to occur for you that some organizations don't even have to think about, right? So when we were doing this exercise, it was pretty clear that there are certain things that you're legally bound to do and that you've always done. Convener, being a regional thought leader, being a planning organization, right? Those things you've always done and you're very sort of deeply rooted, established in doing. Well, when we asked a question, what is the most important thing that SCAG does, and you give it, and you probably remember that question from some of the conversations we have. We've asked that to everybody we've talked to. The answer we get back is all these other expectations they have of you outside of this. Or even when it comes to planning, finer points on planning that go beyond transportation. So it's something that you need to confront, clarify, and so on. So the additional roles that keep coming up, the ones that get really emphasized, are being an advocate for SoCal to the state and feds. And of course, the state and the feds have expectations for you to be advocates down as well. And being a bridge builder in terms of compromise around difficult issues, finding the middle ground, facilitating that, being an innovation engine, and then steering. So those have to do with sort of investment and policy orientation a little bit. Okay? I'm losing some people over there. I hope it's not too dry. Let's go to the next piece. So now I'm going to kind of dig into these a little bit. So when this data emerged, me and Lori sat with it for a long time. We summarized it, put it into groupings and so forth. And originally there was about 12 roles that I believe kind of surfaced loosely. The executive team did a tremendous amount of work in filtering through that, adding to it, bringing in elements from the previous strategic plan that you're working on now to refine that to a list of 6 that you see here, with finer points below them. So a lot of work has gone into this by them. So it's planning organization is obviously the first piece, and I'll dig into this a little bit in more detail in a second. Continuing to be the regional convener and adding to that capacity builder, right? Advocacy, then the role of being a value-added membership organization, continuing the role of data and information services, being a leader in that, and then lastly, thought leader and policy maker, which, depending on who you talk to, is not always something that is expected of an MPO. And if I'm speaking out of turn, you let me know.
Can you explain what you mean by capacity builder?
Sure. Yes. So with capacity builder, that's the middle item. And by the way, this is going to be a lot of detail. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I believe this is on packet page 89. 90? 90? Okay. So what we mean here, and I'll start with the top piece, regional convener. What that means is that what you've always been doing, convening political thought and business leaders, right? The capacity piece, and I'm going to skip a couple bullets, but the capacity piece means bringing together the voices for information sharing, building everybody's knowledge base, educating members and the communities regarding funding, regional issues, basically raising their decision-making power through information, right? Making them more knowledgeable. And then, being another piece of capacity builder is very targeted sort of administration of the federal and state funds for your regional initiatives. And I'm saying a lot here. The executive team, if you have a twist on any of this, please jump in. Another important piece on that, the regional convener and capacity builder, though, is that creating that environment for expanded thinking and better decision making. Sir.
I think the capacity building is one of those areas we've developed the most in over the last couple of years due to the new resources that we have from REAP and REAP 2. And thinking about things that range from the work that we've done through Go Human, which is really building your capacity to educate your communities, to now evolving that where we can give larger grants to support things like developing a housing trust fund. So it's all of those activities that we do to help our cities advance our regional policies. And we've just been very fortunate to have more and more in this area. So we kind of bundle all of that in capacity building.
Thank you. So let me go back to the top really quickly, hit on planning organization. This is something that you've always done, planning for a better future. There's the legal components of the things that you have to perform, but you'll notice in the middle bullets are voice of disadvantage, being a voice for disadvantaged communities and reducing disparities, basically in a more pointed way, calling out the equity, the responsibility around equity and creating a little bit more equality in the region. And then the last piece being really embracing the expanding role into land use, housing, economics, equity, and all these things that are happening, and your role as an MPO that leads all other MPOs. And then the last piece on this is the advocacy. That's the bottom. So advocating for members at the state and federal level, right? This means going to the state with the initiatives, with the funding, with things that matter to your local government. And we hear this over and over again, making sure SoCal gets its fair share, right? I think I heard that from probably half the folks that I spoke with. On the other side, the folks who are interacting with you want a single voice from SCAG. They don't want, they want to see you as a region. They want you to consolidate the voice of the region when you go to them, rather than having a number of different issues, or fragmentation isn't the right word, but different perspectives across the region. Any other questions on those three roles before I move on to the next set? Value added, data information, and thought leader and policymaker. Okay. I'll just do this. With regard to value added membership organization, we heard a little bit about this. I think Supervisor Hagman brought it up in terms of storytelling, and the video came up, right? But taking a more sort of customer-oriented perspective, right? We heard that from several of you. Hey, what are the bullet points that I can take to my jurisdiction, my constituents, right? How can I represent this? So that kind of stuff. And then, being able to demonstrate the value, allowing members to be able to demonstrate and sort of grasp the value. The data and information resources services, that basically comes down to being the premier and trusted source for data analysis. That applies locally, regionally, nationally, and potentially even beyond, right? And then the last piece about thought leader and policymaker, this has always been, to a certain extent, the thought leadership piece, a part of what SCAG is, developing that shared vision, looking at sustainable, forward-thinking solutions, so that innovation piece, but it goes a little bit further here, in terms of what we are hearing is, hey, is there an opportunity for SCAG to get more involved in policymaking and setting direction, right? And bringing together, being a broker for different partnerships, and funding new ideas and programs in a potentially, if I dare say, in a more aggressive way than you have done in the past. Did you want to say something? I saw you pull that.
Well, I think what's important about the distillation of this idea of roles and articulating them around these 6 categories is around the idea of making what has been implicit explicit. And the value of words, the value of language, is it brings clarity to an idea. And so what's important about this part of the work is for all of us to own it and to say, yes, we believe in this. Yes, we're comfortable with this description. Yes, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is emerging what we will be doing. And that hopefully it gives power to all of us in how we think about the strategic priorities and how we think about the work, because there's a confidence that comes from saying this is who we are and this is what we do.
I'm pausing here because this is sort of the meatiest part of it. I mean, after this, what we go to is the strategic priorities that the ET team has already put together, and a lot of work still remains to put objectives and initiatives and things, specifically on how we'll deliver on those strategic priorities. But, I'm really curious to hear your opinions on these roles. I mean,
Well,
how's it landing? Yeah.
Just while we're gestating ideas and comments, I thought I'd just chime in. We've taken a lot together to synthesize these roles, and there's a lot of details beyond what you see on pages 90 and 91 that feed into this. So it's been distilled, so it probably carries a lot more for those who are closer to it, but it's a very good summary of what we've sort of distilled to be our role that allows us to keep focus on a strategic basis. Are there going to be things that come at us that are going to be crucial and must do? I'm sure, and we'll find ways to address those. But in the main, as we look at our work going forward, we see the 6 roles as very important in our understanding of what stakeholders are telling us they're expecting from us, but more importantly, what we feel like we're objectively able to produce or meet, but secondly, what we're statutorily required to meet. Now, all of this hinge on, because for better or for worse, we are a public agency that's funded to do certain things, and so what we try to do is to expand the capacity that those statutory obligations have given us to then fill these other roles, because that capacity is being given to us as a regional agency.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, these are generality buckets that I feel I see in most of my hats that we wear in different things. It's really how we structure SCAG going forward. Right now, the way we're structured for our standing committees is we're digesting what's been given to us from Sacramento and doing our jobs under our mandate, and then we come out with those policies and we set the plans going forward. What you're adding here is a lot of the advocacy and education portions that, frankly, I think we have to come back as the EAC and figure out what structures we're going to use for that. Is our current standing committees going to be that, is our ledge committee that basically says support or not support a different bill? Now we're going to turn that into, are we going to try to work with drafting legislation, find an author, trying to push it through? It does take a different twist of what we've been doing in the past and adding dimensions on that. And it's great to have the concepts, but now it's going to be up to us how we enact that through our committee structure.
Operationalize it, yeah.
And frankly, I think a lot of our standing committees are too large for something like that. It may be something that the president wants to sit there and make sub-attack units to go off. And education's a huge point. When we start doing videos, and this is what SCAG is, this is what we do, this is a 5-year plan. That's a different audience for our council members than it is our residents, and a completely different bent to go up and talk to our legislators here on the federal or state side and saying, well, these are your visions, but this is how we get from there, and we're going to need, so there are different aspects to it. So I see the depth that you went into on this, and it does take a different role than what we normally do. And then when we start doing, we have more resources. If you haven't noticed, we had 3 times more resources this year than we had in the previous year, which is great. But that's for the benefit of our member agencies. That capacity building has to take a whole new level, not just administratively, you're taking putting a couple more zeros in what you're doing, but no, now since there are a lot more resources, that means a lot more member agencies are going to have to be educated how to apply, how to execute, how to record those grants and those awards to make sure that we're doing our job sending it back up. So it's a lot of different dimensions to this, but I think it covers everything.
Thank you. I think the point is really well taken. We have to revisit our structure and see if we're set up to deliver on these roles that we've identified. That's a fantastic point.
Can I just add on? I really appreciate that too, Supervisor Hagman, because I think one of the things we always hear when we bring things to the committees is that we're overwhelming you with agenda items. And I think part of the reason for that is we're working with a structure that was based off of our work on long-range planning, and now we have all of these other programs to bring forward and all these other areas of interest, and then it's really hard for us to prioritize the time that you all spend on those agendas to make sure we get through everything. So it's been a real struggle, I think, for the staff to kind of align the work that's occurring in the agency with our committee board structure.
Well, with the expanding roles, I would highly suggest we go back and look at those structure. We have a lot of talented people on our regional council that we can use for different parts. And not to give staff more tasking, but maybe smaller, more nimble organizations. Like, I think pretty much every president's heard this from me. It's like, it seems like I go to the Transportation Committee before the Regional Council, and we digest the same thing we just did in the regional, our Transportation Committee and the Regional Council. It's like the subcommittees should be taking care of business, and I think those same reports probably should just be a consent item on a Regional Council. If someone has a question, they can pull it off and get a presentation. But let the work be done in the committees, let the Regional Council do the bigger strategic thinking. But those are just some ideas how we can get, reorganize as we go forward.
So if the idea of clarifying and defining roles is an answer to the question, who are we? Then who are we leads to what we will do and how we will get there, right? The sort of fundamental foundation of any strategic plan is to ask and answer 3 questions. Who are we? Where are we going? And how will we get there? So this next piece that we're going to hand off to Darren starts to speak to this idea of where we're going.
Well, thank you, and thanks, Lori and Reza. As we were talking about last night, how this presentation might go, I think Lori and Reza thought it was a good idea to hear from you this part of the presentation, because it really is kind of a culmination of the work that we've done over the last year. Is for the executive team and with input from our management team to really define what these new strategic priorities might be. You heard me reference yesterday when we were talking about SCAG 101, the existing goals, as we called them in the last plan. They really are our guiding principles. They get worked into our board reports. They're part of our evaluations internal. They're part of COME's evaluation. We use those as a guide to direct all the work that we do as an organization. And so I say that because as we're talking about the revised ones that we put forward today, these 8, we really want to have some thoughtful discussion on that, because as they get refined over the next several months, they will certainly have a lasting impact in guiding resources over the next several years. I'd add on top of that, we've talked a lot about the growth of SCAG and the opportunities that have come with that to do more things. And a lot of that has come through one-time resources. And that's required us to do more work, that's required us to be in more communities, engaged with more people. And with that then comes greater expectations. So as we start to think 2-3 years down the road, knowing that those resources aren't still going to be there and realistically not likely they'll be at that same level, an extra thought about how do we refine the resources that we do have and how do we spend them and how do we prioritize them becomes that much more critical at this time. So we talked about the roles, obviously, and the planning organization certainly being the core of the work that we do, and the value-added membership organization being at that bottom, that foundation of who we are as an organization, and how do we connect with our members. And we've translated the other 4 roles into really 8 strategic priorities to help guide our work. Certainly the first one, they're all broad, and I think that's one of the challenges that we always have as an organization, is that we are a large organization with big aspirations. And this certainly is one of those that is broad, but we think it's important to stay broad, is to really talk about fostering an environment in the region for sustainable growth and change. This is the foundation of what we do in planning, is to know and understand this region is changing. It's growing, although we had some conversations on population reduction, but we know that population growth is going to continue over time, and jobs are going to grow, and we need more housing. And how do we really be that central place for conversations about the future of planning? And that certainly leads with our number 1 priority. And feel free to stop me at any time if you want to discuss and jump in on all these, but I'll just kind of highlight where we left off in our conversations. And then I think this, number 2 came up a lot over the last couple days. It's great to do work. It's great to be leaders in areas, but if we're not able to really communicate that value in a better way to our membership, to the community, to a variety of stakeholders, how important and how valuable can the work actually be? And so number 2 around conveying the influence and impact of SCAG's activities on the region to stakeholders, certainly elevating that ability to find better ways to communicate that the work that we do, which hopefully then encourages two-way conversation around that. Number 3, I think.
Darren, to that point, just another parking lot issue. If you ever thought about forming a communications committee that could help with that, if you ever think of that, I'm in.
All right. Well, thank you, Lucy. Yeah, I mean, our legislative committee is legislative communications membership. I mean, so I think that's a great point, is how do we get them focused more on guiding the communications
Just teaching people the acronyms at SCAG is a job in all of itself.
It is. We could spend, many, many classes just on acronyms for sure. Organize SCAG for greater agility and flexibility to respond to the changing opportunities and needs. I think this is one that's kind of has an internal and external focus, as I think Kurt talked about a little bit with the policy committee structures. Something that we really need to focus on, how we're structured in line with all these roles and opportunities. Number 4, we certainly had touched on. We've done a lot of work on housing. We think we've provided great value to the region on that. As we look out towards the future, our traditional funding is very transportation focused. How do we carve out a couple little different funding sources to ensure that we can keep that capacity building within SCAG for the region on issue areas outside of those traditional ideas around transportation? We've started to do that a little bit with broadband and gotten some special grants, certainly done that with housing, but we need to know, is there going to be a sustainable funding source so we can really maintain and build staffing around that to keep providing that value to the region that we think is very critical. Leverage the diversity of skills, expertise, and experience resident at SCAG and in the region. I think this builds off of a lot of different themes that you heard. We know we have talented staff within the organization. We obviously have a very talented board. We have amazing things going on within the region, doing a better job of sharing all of those things together and using that as a resource to move forward the important regional plans is a critical priority that we really need to develop around. Number 6 builds off on what we've always had as one of our key priorities, is be that regional voice in Sacramento, in Washington, D.C., bringing various entities together to advocate on a group of regional priorities or projects or whatever they might be to ensure that Southern California is represented and getting our fair share. Certainly a lot of objectives to be built in around that. Number 7, and this was something that came up a lot in our management team and executive committee, executive team conversations, was how do we obviously have a goal internally to be very efficient and to be very effective and look towards operational excellence, but we never really defined that in our last strategic plan. So this was something that came up is a real critical and deliberate step to say that, yes, we're not just going to be great at the work that we do, but how we do it, how do we work with each other, how do we add efficiencies and get back a little bit to some of what we hear sometimes externally, that perhaps we could be a little more efficient internally. And even though most of our bureaucratic processes do trickle down from various state and federal requirements, there's always a better way and a more efficient way to operationalize our work internally. And then lastly, certainly be that premier source of regional information and analysis. Looking back in the past 20 years of our strategic plans, there's always been this element of that, is we know the work that we do creates information that is valuable to so many different entities. And finding a way to best communicate that, make it available, provide analysis on it, and really spread that work and that information throughout the region is something that is critical, that we think, to our role in our success. So I turned over to the executive team to see if there's anything that I missed that you want to add that you think is important on these, because this is really the foundation of what the plan really means when we're trying to turn it into actions. No? All right. I just have to say, at dinner last night, and I'm glad that everyone's still here, I sat down at a table, and then before I knew it, everybody left. And then I went to another table, and everybody left. So I'm just glad that I got to talk for 10 minutes, and only one person left. It was Kurt, but I'll
How about y'all just give Darren a hand? How's that?
So any comments in the room about these priorities? Again, do they ring true? Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate seeing it like this. I know that one of the emerging themes is discussed is a shifting I'll just read it. SCAG's role is shifting as stakeholders look to organize for support outside of its established purview. Southern California is a big place. We have a lot of interests, and SCAG staff does an amazing job being responsive to the desires of the regional council. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not completely sold on this idea of needing to move outside of the established purview. I'm glad that SCAG staff seems to be willing to do so, but to optimize, using some of this language up here, efficiencies, you know, the strategic plan can be that we focus on doing what we already do and doing that well or even better. And, you know, if you, and I've been accused of this, and I am guilty of it personally, just spreading myself too thin. People say, ask for a volunteer, continue to raise my hand, and you know, I admit that as a result, if I were more focused on specific tasks as opposed to everything for everyone, I could probably be more effective. So I throw that out there as something to discuss, to think about, because there are other agencies that their whole thing is that one thing, and they are known for that, and that's their domain, and it's undisputed. I don't know if we need to get into other areas outside of, you know, transportation, housing, the bread and butter that is there for us, particularly if we're looking at long-term questions about true ongoing funding. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Jan?
I just wonder if you could be more specific of those things that you think that we should, you know, we should be wary of including in the
Well, it can be, pick one, but you know, and I know that there are some advocates in the room for this, and I am not one of them, but that would be water. We are not, I don't believe, a water agency. I know arguments can be made that housing is related to water, that this is a fundamental thing. We can make all kinds of arguments, but that is not who we are. And I guarantee you the water agencies are going to be pissed if we start getting into their sandbox. So,
If I could add just a couple. I think that's an excellent comment, and there's two parts I think that's worth highlighting. One is our role has changed over the last 5 years by law, by requirements at the state and the federal level. And I think at times during this strategic planning effort, we all, meaning the executive team, we struggled that there weren't kind of big ideas in this plan, that we were spending a lot of time, as you said, doing a strategic plan to more fully account for the work that we're responsible for. And I think what you'll see in this plan is it is really more focused on that than thinking of new areas. But the issues that you raised certainly the broad ability that we have as an organization to weigh in and participate in the variety of issues that happen in the region, there isn't really a structure to identify and choose which ones we go after, right? It's often determined by funding, but I know other organizations like WRCOG has a committee and have spent time developing a structure of how they choose when issues come and raise to that level. So I think that's a really important point. Is that when we are looking at new issues, what kind of analysis we're doing to see, can we provide value? Do we have the resources to do it right? Are there other people in that area? And so I think that's something we probably should think about working in to the plan. We tend to do it through presidential priorities, and I think the last few presidents, we've had a great opportunity to make sure that work plan was cohesive year to year, but that hasn't always happened in the past.
So really quickly, just on the point you brought up about WRCOG, there's a reason I believe that that committee is in place, because there were problems and that the organization went too far outside of its traditional purview. And one that, there are still outstanding issues on specific, that there was some entrepreneurial things that had promise, but did not end up panning out, and as a result caused some serious problems after the fact. But anyway, thank you.
Deborah?
Yes, thank you. When I was looking over this material, and thank you guys for the presentation and things. First off, I was looking at what you said in the beginning, the outreach and who you had covered. And it was roughly, I think you said something like 150 people. But I was thinking, well, we're not privy to what was said. I think you just pulled it together, and that's fine. You synthesized the essence. However, when I was reading it, I was on this page of what we learned. I wanted to know, well, what you learned, was there, especially maybe when you RC surveyed with 25 respondents, I would assume outside the organization, was there one particular thing that kind of rose to the top of the things that you got from the external, which gave you some feedback on the operations of the internal? And I only say that because I agree. I don't think you need to start trying to make adjustments unless the structure of the role of an MPO or metropolitan planning area, statistical planning area, has that federal direction for you to do. I think what I was reading through all of this was that I know that you try to be accommodating, but there is a core that this objective, what this organization is. And perhaps, again, it goes back to the communication. And I think I got the feeling that the staff, internal, felt some inks and frustrations. And so maybe what you're doing, how can we better communicate outward whatever that product is? And then to Lucy's point of the communication, I kid you not, the acronyms alone is enough to, you need to get maybe a certificate of completion when you get it. Just because on this one here, this isn't yours, I said here that recalibrate SCAG's role, and I said with emerging technology, I thought that's what it was, but I didn't know what MT was. So he comes over and I said, I think I know emerging technology. I don't know, maybe that's what you guys want to focus on. And he goes, no, that's executive team and the management team. Well, in my world, we used to have, it would be EX team or EXT. And so I was like, see, just getting through our structures here in this presentation. So I agree. I don't think you'll be further exhausted. People are going to come in and go out, and we're going to have to those that come in for a purpose, they need to help understand the purpose, the core purpose of the MPO. Not necessarily the MPO start trying to, move in a direction of some of the other issues that they're not regional, because within our region, and I'll reference the situation with the water, it's not a regional impact to everybody in the region, depending on what water resources you're looking at and where they're going and who's doing what. So I don't have a problem with water has not become on the table to focus on, but it's become a item within a committee that has a policy committee, energy and environment. We have to look at air. We need to look at resources, environmental, and the collaborations and the coexistence to another policy, which is the housing elements. But it's not that we need to all of a sudden we have broadband. And broadband is something that we may plan for it, but we ultimately still have to do a lot of collaboration within areas, including the tribal nations. I told him, I said, if you go into your casino, you don't have any Wi-Fi in some places. So that's not for SCAG to have to start fixing that all the way. We might have a blueprint, and we might say this is, the toolbox might help us gather everything, what we need, look at us in a 6-county region, but it's still going to probably be left up to individual counties and regions to coordinate and tie in and collaborate in the subregions. So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm going to try to respond.
I didn't want to leave, but I do have to.
I don't think we have a whole lot of time. I think we're down to about 5 minutes, and we have to yield the room soon. So I'm going to ask that you try to wrap up. We'll take notes, because I think everything that's been said, this is part of what we want, is some input into the conversation. So I'm not sure we can respond to everything that's said in the time that we have left. We've already overstayed our
welcome.
Our welcome in the room.
And can I just ask something? This is your strategic plan.
Yes.
This is what you guys are going to go back in.
Yeah, and it's going to come back to you.
Still, we will bless it, but you still are the ones, and we'll probably hopefully be the insulator to keep us in that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll still come back. This is really first blush to get your impressions on it. So.
And all I would say to this slide before we go to the last one is the notion of a priority is a broad area of focus. The next round of work that happens is that you double click on those priorities to frame out the objectives, which is where the rubber meets the road and the specificity comes in of the work to be done. So to your point about mission creep taking on more, sticking to the knitting, to your point about how do we think about communication and impact and the resources that are needed to do that, that work emerges through the next step in which we start to articulate those objectives, which are specifically what will we do, and then the key results, which will be how will we measure our success in getting there. The last piece is a note, and this is some of the early work that has come out of internal, external feedback, which goes back to core values. And what we wanted to point out here is that for any number of years, SCAG has maintained 4 core values: be open, lead by example, make an impact, be courageous. And yet, with the changing landscape, with issues that have emerged that are current, that our people are paying much, much more attention to, the focus on equity within SCAG's work, leadership and employees felt very strongly that it was time to add a 5th value that specifically focused on diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging. And so adding to the 4, this 5th of cultivate belonging. And again, as I said earlier, how do we move from the implicit to the explicit to explicitly say we embrace differences, foster equity, champion inclusion, and empower all? That becomes part of the core value and culture of SCAG that informs our behavior. So that's the last piece that we wanted to point out this morning, in case there's any reaction to that.
I'll just say, and then with the new piece, how do you plan to measure it?
Well, it's a value. It doesn't really lend itself to, it's not going to be one of the things you add key performance indicators on, but it does speak to what we already are doing based on the resolution of the Regional Council on Equity. And so this is part of how we behave anyway, but it wasn't explicitly called out as a value, as a foundational behavioral element of SCAG as an organization. So we already, in the course of our work, try to embrace and make sure when you look at just the population of the region, make sure that we're serving all of the populations of the region. When you look at the structure of capacity within the various jurisdictions that are members of SCAG, they all have varying capacities. And so making sure that we foster equity also amounts to the way we serve the various cities and counties that we have within our region. So it really just, I think what we found in the conversation is there was a need to be more explicit instead of just assuming that. People know we're equitable. We need to be more explicit about calling that out as a value for the organization. And so it conditions everything we do. It doesn't lend itself to a particular KPI, but it should be reflected in how we behave.
And I agree. That's one of the tasks that the Regional Council tackled in looking at equity, because equity became one of the federal matters to be addressed. But I'm just still saying a value you need to, at some point, rolls into your mission, which rolls into some objectives. And so I'm good with it as a value. I just still will say we live by those values, that at some point we have to live by them, and we have to also reflect them.
Well, yeah, I think it's, go ahead. It's going to be reflected ultimately in how we execute our priorities. And those then will have measurable objectives that will hopefully be able to report back. One of the things that I think, and I know I'm talking too long here, I know we're past time. One of the things I'm hoping you see when this comes back to you, when it's fully baked, is it allows us to be a lot more logical in how we track the work that we do with performance indicators. Our current strategic plan has goals in it, no objectives tied to them. So we sort of assume that we're meeting the goals. Yeah. So you'll see, I think you have a slide that shows what the next steps are. Debbie, you were going to say something.
I was just going to add that we fully expect and will be intentional about adding key performance indicators that demonstrate our work on equity throughout the organization. So you'll see that later on, that it will be tracked and tied back to that value.
So to wrap up, a plan for the next few months, high level albeit, but the idea is that we are here through the summer and the fall. We will be putting together working groups consisting of subject experts to tackle the priorities and begin to develop objectives and key results. The intent is to finalize in the fall, then begin to create an action plan that will identify key areas for implementation, and in the new year, in 2024, begin implementation of the plan.
Anybody? That's it.
Well, again, I want to thank Lori and Reza for the work they've done, but mostly for just tolerating us the last year and a half or so. And there's a few more months to go, so thank you. And of course, Debbie for leading the effort and keeping us on track. Mr. President?
That's it. I want to thank everybody who attended. We lost a few because they had meetings, but those of you that stuck it out, thank you.
Mr. President, what are those bags in the back about? What are those bags in the back about?
The bags,
They're going back to my office.
the swag bags.
Swag bags? Did the two presenters get a bag? You'll get one.
Stuff we all get, that's what swag
Yeah, that's what it is, stuff we all get. Well, there's nothing else then. We're adjourned.
All right. Thank you all.